Chapter 428. Southern Xia Northern Shun. Luo Tan unhurriedly said. Shen Miao was startled. Luo Tan was already proudly shaking her head. Everyone knows that there are two great military families in Mingqi. One is Gugu and Gufu's formidable great general Shen family, and the other is the Xia family of the residents of the Marquis of Lin, and older brother Qiu is a talent of the Shen family, and one heard that the little Marquis of the residents of the Marquis of Lin, and is also a stunning talent. At that time Zhu Fu had the fortune to see that little Marquis of the Xia family once, and said that this child is not a person of the pond, and will one day soar to the 9 heavens. Maternal Zhu Fu. Seen little Marquis of the Xia family? Shen Miao asked hesitantly. Luo Qian also said, that's right. Older sister, why do I not know? You only know how to eat. How would you know? Luo Tan rolled her eyes at Luo Qian, and continued. One heard that in the beginning when the Marquis of Lin took the military strategy, one coincidentally saw little Marquis Xia in the tent. After Zhu Fu saw that little Marquis Xia, he sighed. Originally I wanted to inquire about it, but Zhu Fu told me to stay away from him, and said that little Marquis Xia is a dangerous person, and not to be provoked. Shen Miao's eyes hung down. She did not know that Luo Sui had seen Xie Jingxing before. But Luo Sui was actually able to see that Xie Jingxing was not simple. Before she could break free from her own thoughts, she heard Luo Tan asking, youngest Biao sister, speaking of which, you also grew up in the Ding capital, so you should have seen that little Marquis Xie before? Shen Miao paused for a moment and nodded her head. What does he look like? Luo Tan grabbed Shen Miao's arm. Is it the same as the rumors say that he is a handsome immortal? Is he more handsome than older brother Ling? The older brother Ling that she was talking about was naturally Luo Ling. Among the 3 sons of the Luo family, Luo Ling was gentle, Luo Sa was violent, and Luo Qian was lively. It was just that because Luo Ling was the most gentle, he looked the most handsome. Shen Miao said, not as handsome as older brother Ling. Ah. Luo Tan released her hand, her eyes filled with disappointment. But I heard that the Xia young Marquis has a good appearance, and his character is the most romantic. If a woman were to take a look at him, they would be intoxicated. You're even inferior to big brother Ling? Luo Qian looked at her gloatingly. The most important thing for a man is naturally his ability. What does it have to do with looks? Moreover, even if that little Xia Marquis is really looking for a wife, he would definitely not look for someone like you. Luo Qian smiled as he looked at Shen Miao. Naturally one would look for youngest Biao sister, this kind of fresh and gentle young lady. Luo Tan and Luo Qian immediately became a mess. Shen Miao held her forehead as she looked at the 2 siblings quarreling, and felt somewhat helpless in her heart. She did not expect that Xie Jingxing's reputation would spread far and wide in the Shaochun city. Thinking about Xie Jingxing's trip to the northern borderland, he should have already arrived. This was his first time leading troops into battle as a young marshal. Although he knew that Xie Jingxing had the ability to lead troops into battle, but when he thought of the ending of this person's previous life, his heart could not help but shrink. Forget it. Shen Miao shook her head and drove away those inexplicable thoughts in her heart. In the past, she thought that Xie Jingxing was best at commanding troops and setting up formations. But now that she fought with Xie Jingxing, she realized that he was best at playing chess behind the scenes. That person's mind was calm and steady, so he must definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Time passed by in a flash. Luo Tan and Luo Qian sat at Shen Miao's place until evening. The skies started to turn gloomy. Once it was the 9th or 10th month in the Shaochun city, the grasslands outside the city would be dry, but there would often be heavy rain in the city. Different from the rain in the Ding capital, the rain in the Shaochun city carried the smell of sand and was incomparably fierce. The dark clouds almost covered the entire sky, and in a short moment, it was as if it was night time. Luo Tan looked at the sky and said, not good. One fear that there will be hail again. Chapter 429. Why haven't uncle and the others returned yet? Luo Qian stood up as well and frowned. Although the Luo family army had dispersed, they still needed people to guard the city. On normal days, Luo Lianing and Luo Liantai would be working in the guards, and when Shen Xian came, he would bring Shen Qiu along to help. On the other hand, he was supposed to return to the mansion for dinner in the evening, but he had yet to return at this time. Shen Miao looked outside, and suddenly thought of something as her face changed. Luo Tan saw that Shen Miao's expression was not right, and thought that she was afraid and felt somewhat strange in her heart. Biao, youngest sister, are you afraid of hail? There was one a few days ago, and you weren't afraid then. Why are you afraid now? Speaking till here, he patted Shen Miao's shoulders. Do not be afraid. We have lived here for so many years, and there would often be hail at this time of the year. Don't be afraid. Shen Miao did not get better because of her comfort, and her expression became uglier. As such, even the carefree Luo Qian also felt that something was wrong. He looked at Shen Miao doubtfully. Why is Biao, youngest sister, so nervous? Is it because you are worried about Gufu? It's okay. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard someone calling from outside. It was the Luo family's manservant. Because he ran too fast, he even tripped. He said, Young master, young lady, Lady Biao, Madam wants you to go to the hall quickly. Luo Tan was stunned and frowned. What happened? The two Jew came to snatch things again. So master brought the two masters and General Shun to the grasslands. The two young masters are still in the mansion, and the weather is about to change. Miss, please hurry to the main hall. Although the manservant was a little anxious, his attitude was not flustered. It was obvious that this had happened many times, and he seemed to have some experience. Luo Tan angrily stomped her foot. Damn Turks! Luo Qian said to Shen Miao. Biao, youngest sister, follow us in first. It will be all right. At this time, he did not forget to comfort Shen Miao. Shen Miao nodded her head. When they reached the front hall of the Luo residence, there were already quite a number of people gathered there. Both Madame Yu and Madame Ma were in the hall. When they saw the three of them, they heaved a sigh of relief. Most likely Madame Ma was afraid of scaring Shen Miao, so she walked over to Shen Miao's side and pulled Shen Miao's hands. Jiao Jiao had not seen such big hailstones before. It is all right, later we will talk in the hall. After so long, Jiao Jiao had never told us about the matters in the Ding capital. However, he did not mention anything about the Turks at all. Madame Yu's temperament was a bit gentler, so she also smiled and said, That's right. Let's eat lamb stew tonight. I wonder if Jiao Jiao will like it. The Shaochun city was adjacent to the grasslands, and when the two Jew did not come to rob, they would use cattle and sheep to exchange for some daily necessities. Cattle and sheep were born sturdy. After slaughtering the fresh sheep, they cut the mutton into thin slices and set up a small pot. The thin and plump slices were almost cooked as soon as they came into contact with water. Then, they were dipped in a little spicy sauce. Previously Luo Tan wanted to let Shen Miao eat the lamb here, but was afraid that she would not be used to it. She did not think that it would be brought up today. It was obvious that she wanted Shen Miao to be distracted and not think about other things. Shen Miao smiled gently at Madame Yu. The Luo family always released their goodwill to the greatest extent. The two Jews' nest was in the depths of the grasslands, and every time there was a pursuit, the Luo family's army did not have enough manpower. It required all the able-bodied males of the Luo family to move out in full strength. But this year with Shen Xian and wife it was better. Shen Xian, Luo Shui Yan, Shen Qiu, Luo Lianing and Luo Liantai all went, and even Luo Sui also followed. In the Shaochun city, only the Luo family could guard the commoners. Originally Luo Ling and Luo Sa also wanted to go, but since Shen Xian and the rest went, Luo Ling and Luo Sa stayed in the Shaochun city. The sky outside was already dark and Luo Tan bit her lips tightly, looking somewhat sullen. Her own home was being robbed by others every year. No matter what, she would not be happy. Chapter 430. Most of the people in the hall were females, and there were also some maids and servants. Bai Lu and Shuangjiang quietly handed the snacks that were left in the afternoon to Shen Miao for her to eat. The pot was already set up in the hall, and the kitchen was cutting the lamb. The soup in the pot started to emit an aroma, but at this time no one was in the mood to be happy. Luo Qian felt somewhat hungry, and when he saw that there were some snacks beside Shen Miao, he walked over and sat down beside Shen Miao and picked up a snack to eat. Shen Miao looked at him without blinking. Luo Qian was somewhat baffled by Shen Miao's gaze and finally scratched his head and could not help but speak. Biao, youngest sister, why are you looking at me for? Are you afraid? The place where both of them sat was far away from Madame Yu and the rest, so ordinary people would not be able to hear their voices. Shen Miao said, Older brother Qian, why is Waizu not willing to reorganize the Luo family's army? Luo Qian was startled. That day when Waizu heard me speak, he was angry. One fear that it was not because there was no money to support the Luo family's army. Older brother Qian, can you tell me the reason? Luo Qian's eyes looked around and avoided Shen Miao's eyes as he stammered. What reason is there? It is just that there is no money. Biao, youngest sister, should not think too much. Without money, how can one build the Luo family's army? Shen Miao looked at him quietly. Her eyes were bright and moving, full of clarity, without the slightest bit of emotion. However, it was this kind of frank expression that made people unable to resist. It made people feel that lying in front of such a pair of eyes was blasphemy. Luo Qian was after all a lively youth, and his relationship with Shen Miao was not bad, so he finally gave up and said softly, Biao, youngest sister, this matter is something that no one in our residence dare to say. But since you are one of us, I will tell you about it. Even if you know about it, do not tell others. If my father and mother knew that I told you about it, I will definitely receive a beating. Shen Miao nodded her head. Actually, you are not the first person to mention the matter of reorganizing the Luo family's army. Luo Qian said. The time when the Luo family's army really started to decline was not long after youngest Gu was born. At that time the Luo family was already declining, and Zuzu's ambitions were not fulfilled. When Zuzu saw that he was depressed all day, she proposed to revive the Luo family's army. Grandfather already had this idea in his heart, and as soon as grandmother said so, he immediately made preparations. But at that time we were still short of money, so grandmother said what Biao Mei said to grandfather that day, that the army should be famous. As long as we win the battle, His Majesty will notice this army and naturally allocate the money. At that time, the problem of the silver would be solved. Thus, my grandfather volunteered to be the commander to fight a border war. Luo Qian sighed. Biao, youngest sister, you should have already guessed what the result was. Grandfather's great defeat had almost become a joke. The Luo family's army was already in decline, and after suffering such a heavy blow, they were even more unable to recover. Most importantly, when grandfather was leading the army to war, grandmother was seriously ill. In order to make grandfather feel at ease, grandmother didn't let her family tell grandfather the news. By the time grandfather returned from the defeat, grandmother had already passed away. Grandfather always felt that if he didn't fulfill his promise to grandmother, he wouldn't be able to face her even if he died 100 years later. After so many years, he did not reorganize the Luo family's army, because he did not have the courage to face the past failures. Luo Qian put down the snacks in his hands and looked at Shen Miao. Biao, youngest sister, I know that you want to let the Luo family's army regain its prestige, but our Luo family does not seek to be famous. My mother said before that one must cherish the people in front of one. Just like grandfather, if time could be turned back, he would definitely not fight that war and choose to stay by grandmother's side. So if one can make grandfather happy, even if the Luo family's army continues to be depressed, it would not matter. Chapter 431. Shen Miao looked at Luo Qian, and her heart was slightly surprised. She did not think that with Luo Qian's carefree temperament, he would actually say such words. The Luo family's righteousness, kindness was indeed not fake. But to know of such a past event from Luo Qian's mouth, one's heart also sighed. This was the worst defeat of the awe-inspiring great general's life. Was it because he was overconfident, or because he didn't have any confidence in the outcome? Shen Miao thought that it was not that Luo Sui could not afford to lose this battle, but the one he could not afford to lose was none other than Luo Foreign. Abandoning his ill wife and choosing meritorious service, the final outcome ruthlessly slapped him in the face. No wonder that when Shen Miao said those words that day, Luo Sui's face instantly changed color. One fear that the most hidden pain in this general's heart had been evoked. But if one is depressed like this, would Waizumu be happy? Shen Miao suddenly opened her mouth. Ai! Luo Qian turned his head to look at her, and was somewhat puzzled. Shen Miao smiled gently. If I admire a person and he is a hero, one would hope that he would wear the treasured sword that he should wear, ride the fierce horse that he should ride, lead the bravest soldiers and obtain the most proud meritorious service. I am not willing for him to suffer grievances. Now that Waizumu is suffering grievances, if Waizumu knew, would she not feel heartache? If it was me, I would feel heartache. Luo Qian was somewhat confused by Shen Miao's words. Not to mention anything else, to say admire in front of a male like him made him somewhat aghast. Madame Ma also said that Shen Miao was a young lady from the Ding capital, and was delicate and timid. One must take good care of her, as she would have a shy temperament. Now it seemed, or was there any shyness? One feared that she was more magnanimous than Luo Tan. Just as he was thinking, one heard a servant shouting outside. Eldest young master, second young master is back. Everyone looked towards the entrance of the hall, and it was the two brothers, Luo Ling and Luo Sa. Most likely it was about to rain outside, as the air was somewhat humid. Both of their clothes seemed to be stained with water. Luo Ling and Luo Sa had just returned from the garrison, and looked somewhat travel-worn. Madame Yu first instructed the servant to pour tea for both of them, and Luo Sa downed it in one gulp. Luo Tan had already ran up and asked Luo Ling, "Older brother Ling, how is it outside? Seeing that it's going to hail, I've already told the commoners to go back to their houses to hide. Everything is prepared outside." Luo Ling replied with a smile, "Second younger brother, and I will guard here for the night after returning. Our hall is sturdy, so there's nothing to be afraid of." "What happened to Dad, Uncle and Grandpa?" Luo Tan asked relentlessly. Luo Sa frowned and said, "He's not back yet." Luo Tan still wanted to say something, but when Luo Ling saw Luo Qian and Shen Miao walking over, he quickly said, "It is nothing. Most likely one would be somewhat busy tonight, and would return tomorrow." He changed the topic. "It smells so good. Are we going to eat hot mutton tonight? Cousin has never eaten this before. I don't know if she is used to it." Shen Miao walked in front of Luo Ling. Luo Ling was 18 this year, and his brows were as handsome as Luo Lianing, but his temperament was as gentle and considerate as Madame Yu. It was a far cry from Luo Sa's violent and unruly temperament. Shen Miao said, "Older brother Ling, is the city guards deployed?" Luo Ling was surprised for a moment as he did not expect that Shen Miao would ask about this and replied, "It is all arranged." "How many people are there in the city guards?" Shen Miao asked. This time Luo Sa's gaze landed on Shen Miao. When these juniors spoke, Madame Yu and Madame Ma were far away. Luo Qian asked, "Why is youngest Biao's sister asking this for? Tonight there will be hail, so most likely no one will enter the city. 30 in the east and 30 in the west. In addition to 10 in the north, there are a total of 70 people." Luo Ling patiently answered. Chapter 432. Is there usually so many people? Shen Miao asked. After hesitating for a moment, Luo Ling said, "On normal days there would be more people, but today father and the rest had transferred them away, so there are not many city guards left. However, as long as nothing happened in the city, 70 people would be enough. The weather is not good tonight. Little brother is right, no one should enter the city." The Luo army only had so many people that it could use. In pursuing the Turks, it was only natural that it take all the useful people with it. The remaining city guards seemed to be stretched thin. Of course the Shaochun city had been safe and sound for so many years. The city guards would at most help to capture fugitives or thieves, and there was not much use. Luo Sa stared at Shen Miao for a while and suddenly said, "You are afraid that the two Zhu will attack?" Everyone was taken aback by his words. Luo Tan's jaw dropped. Luo Qian asked, "Second brother, what are you talking about? Why would the Turks attack?" Luo Sa sneered and stared at Shen Miao's eyes without blinking. "Didn't Biao's youngest sister say it on the day you came? The two Zhu have ambition and strength, so why can't they attack? Is this what you're afraid of?" Luo Sa's character was somewhat aggressive and facing his sharp gaze. Shen Miao nodded her head. Correct. What I am afraid of is this. How is this possible? Luo Tan said. Not to say if what you said will happen. Today father and Gufu had gone to the grasslands to pursue the two Ju. So how would the two Ju be distracted to attack the Shaochun city? If he was really ambitious, wouldn't it have been better to find an opportunity before? Luring the tiger away from the mountain. Not only the Mingqi people would use it. Shen Miao said lightly. Even though the two Ju are nomads, they are not fools. After living with the people of the Shaochun city for so many years, do you think that you would not learn something? As long as the Turks aren't fools, they would have learned it long ago. Shen Miao's uncharacteristic cold attitude made the few of them somewhat surprised. After a moment of silence, it was Luo Ling who spoke first. Youngest Biao sister, is this your own guess or where did you hear this news? Shen Miao had always been worried that the Turks would attack the city, and today she was acting so strangely. Everyone noticed this point, and as long as one was not a fool, they would be able to see that something was wrong. Simply being afraid was one thing, but if he got other information from somewhere else, it would be another matter. Intuition. Intuition. Luo Sa was not angry but laughed. Biao youngest sister, this is not the time to joke. Could it be that both older brothers have been in the city's guards for so many years, and do not know the logic of taking preventive measures? Shen Miao's expression was slightly restrained, and the meekness in her eyes was restrained, and gradually there was determination. She said, if the Turks really attack, we can prepare in advance, and naturally everyone will be happy. If they did not attack, the Shaochun city would be spared from the calamity. Would it not be a good thing? Could it be that bad things had to happen in order to be prepared? If they don't even understand this, it's no wonder that the Luo family is on the decline. Luo Sa was furious. Luo Tan's and Luo Qian's faces were also not looking good. It was Luo Ling who stared at Shen Miao for a while, and his expression did not change, and was as gentle as before. He cupped his hands towards her and said, Biao youngest sister is right. It is us who are slow-witted, but based on the lack of manpower of the city's guards, it is an irrefutable fact. Based on Biao youngest sister's opinion, what should be done? On the surface it was a question, but it was to ask her to solve a thorny problem, and to test her ability. Shen Miao's heart was startled. This gentle Biao older brother was not as generous as he looked on the surface. She said, if it really come to this step, it is not possible for the manpower to increase for no reason. The Turks came prepared, and we are naturally not their opponent. I am after all a female and do not know martial arts. Rather than taking risks, it is better to protect myself. Older brother Ling, why not gather more guards at the Luo residence's doors to protect the Luo residents? If there is a problem, they would be able to resist for a while. When her slippery words came out, everyone was stunned. She spoke so vehemently, but at this moment, why did she show such a helpless look? For a moment, the younger generation of the Luo family did not understand Shen Miao's meaning. Luo Sa was the most depressed. He wanted to get angry when he saw Shen Miao, but could not find a reason to get angry, and could only sit at the side with a face full of anger. Luo Ling looked at Shen Miao meaningfully and said unexpectedly, then do as Biao youngest sister says. Everyone sat down in the hall again. One did not know why, but because of Shen Miao's words, the atmosphere became somewhat stiff. Even Luo Qian and Luo Tan seemed to be nervous. Only Madame Ma and Madame Yu did not know anything, and were still instructing the chefs in the kitchen. It was until the sky was completely dark that Luo Ling's guard suddenly requested to see him. Luo Ling let him in, and that guard's expression was anxious as he whispered a few words to Luo Ling's ear. Luo Ling's expression changed and suddenly looked towards Shen Miao. Shen Miao was drinking tea leisurely. Chapter 433. Shen Miao was leisurely drinking tea. At this time, when the wind was raging outside, she was sitting in a corner of the hall, and slowly sipping the hot tea that Jingzhe handed over. It was as if she was really a naive and innocent young lady, who was waiting for the lamb slices at the back of the kitchen to be ready, so that she could sit around and enjoy the hot lamb. Luo Ling's expression became somewhat serious. Luo Sa noticed that something was wrong with him, and followed Luo Ling's gaze to look at Shen Miao. His face also sank a bit as he asked, "What happened?" Luo Ling did not care about him, and did not instruct the guard what to do, but stood up and walked in front of Shen Miao. "Biao, youngest sister, step aside to talk. Cousin Ling, if you have anything to say, just say it here." Shen Miao put the teacup in her hands aside and looked at him with a smile. If something really happened, it would not be hidden. Seeing this, Luo Qian and Luo Tan also walked over. "Madam Ma and Madam, you noticed the commotion this time." They thought that there was a dispute between Shen Miao and Luo Ling, and at this time, they would naturally side with the female. Madam Yu immediately walked over and glanced at Luo Ling, before shaking her head in disapproval. "Linger, do not scare Jiao Jiao." Hearing this, Luo Sa sneered and said, "Who's scaring who? Big brother, what exactly happened?" Luo Qian was young and spoke without thinking. If he had any doubts in his heart, he would ask out loud. Luo Ling looked at Shen Miao, and Shen Miao smiled gently at him, as if she knew what he was going to say next. That calmness of grasping everything made Luo Ling slightly startled. A moment later he sighed and said helplessly, "The city guards have sent news that the Turks. It looks like they're entering the city." "What?" Luo Tan exclaimed. She immediately realized that her voice was too loud, so she covered her mouth. As they spoke, the surrounding maids and senior servants were far away, and did not hear clearly. But the greatest taboo in the world was to shake the morale of the army. They had gathered here to hide from the hail. But if the Turks were to learn that they had entered, the morale of the army would immediately fall into disarray. Even if there was no chaos because of Luo Ling and Luo Sa, at least there would be panic. Madam Yu and Madam Ma were from ordinary families, and naturally did not have the ability to protect themselves. When they heard this, they were stunned. Madam Ma immediately said, "Linger Sir, shouldn't we get someone to protect Jiao Jiao and the others first? How long can our Luo residents resist? When will your father come back?" Even the smartest and most capable woman couldn't help but panic when faced with such a situation. As for Yushir, she didn't know what to do. However, she still subconsciously said, "Why don't we hide somewhere first?" Luo Tan's and Luo Qian's faces were somewhat pale. They had lived in the Shaochun city since birth. And even though they had heard Luo Sui's stories of the battlefield, but they always felt that it was something far away from them. The Turks never entered the cities, but the stories of what would happen to them once they entered the cities had no shortage of stories. Even if Ming Qi's own soldiers attacked a city, there would be a massacre, not to mention the two Jews' savage nature. Biaomei actually guessed correctly," Luo Qian muttered. Madam Ma and Madam Yu were surprised for a moment before Madam Yu looked at Shen Miao. "Jiao Jiao, guess correctly?" Biaomei previously mentioned that the two Jew might attack the city. Luo Ling looked at her, and an unclear light flashed in his eyes. Biaomei must have a countermeasure. "If one does not mind, please inform me. Now is the time of life and death." Luo Ling's attitude was extremely low, or it could be said that the Luo family would not have the arrogant thoughts of others. Otherwise, with Luo Ling's seniority and status, there was no need to be so humble to consult a young female. Chapter 434. When Luo Ling's action landed in Madame Ma's and the rest's eyes, they were extremely shocked. Luo Ling was the most outstanding among the younger generation of the Luo family. And now he actually wanted to consult Shen Miao? Shen Miao said, "Older brother Ling also did not tell me what is the situation now." Luo Ling waved his hands to summon the guard who came to report. When the guard saw Luo Ling going to ask an unfamiliar young lady, he was somewhat surprised but still honestly replying, "Young lady." Someone from the guard saw the two Jew gathering at the city gates. The general has not returned, and the city guards do not have enough manpower. At the end, he was so ashamed that he could not speak anymore. Shen Miao did not have time to bother about his awkwardness and asked instead, "Is there a lot of manpower or not? Are the two Jews scattered or united?" Luo Sa's eyes were like torches as he stared at Shen Miao. That guard thought about it and said, "There are a lot of manpower. Even though they are scattered, there is the sound of horses. There should be reinforcements." The few of them suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. Luo Ling's and Luo Sa's expression became extremely ugly in a moment. If there was some fluke just now. At this moment they were really aware of the seriousness of the matter. Having horses meant that there was an army. The army that was able to contend with the two Zhu on normal days was now fighting in the grasslands. At the moment the Shaochun city did not have any real military strength. But at this time they caught up with another two Zhu army. Shen Miao was right. It was a diversion to lure the tiger away from the mountain. These two Zhu had become cunning, and even secretly developed another army. This army might not be as strong as the one that Shen Xian dealt with, but to bathe the Shaochun city in blood, it was more than enough. Madame Ma and Madame Yu also realized that the matter was not good. Madame Ma said, "Why not call back all the manpower that can be used? No matter what, first protect you younger generation." It was the tradition of the Luo family, since ancient times, to let the younger generation leave first when there was an accident. It was to sacrifice the older generation and leave the hope to the younger generation. Luo Tan's eyes immediately turned red and pulled Madame Ma's sleeves. "Mother, I do not want. If it is really not possible, then fight it out with them." Luo Qian gritted his teeth, and there were two flames of anger in his eyes. "In any case, we have the blood of generals flowing in our bones. Could it be that we are still afraid of those barbarians? Take the sword. At most, we will die together." "Qian, Madame Ma said angrily. "What nonsense are you talking about? Do you want to die if you go out now? If it really doesn't work, big brother, and I will cover your escape." It was Luo Sa who opened his mouth. He said solemnly, "There are still carriages in the residence. Escape from the back gate of the city. There is a section of mountain road. We will not be discovered even if we hide." "No." Shen Miao interrupted them. Luo Sa looked at her. "Do you have a way?" Shen Miao shook her head. A trace of disappointment flashed across Luo Qian's and Luo Tan's faces at the same time. They did not know why, but they felt that Shen Miao seemed to have a lot of ability. Even though she looked delicate and noble and had tender skin. But every time they spoke to Shen Miao, that kind of peace and confidence made one feel at ease, as if they had a backbone. But now that Shen Miao could not think of a solution, Luo Qian and Luo Tan were somewhat desperate. "Then do as second younger brother says." Luo Ling said. "First send you to the horse carriage, and all the guards in the residence will follow you. It is enough to leave second younger brother, and me in the Luo residence. I will go with second younger brother to the city guards." This was to sacrifice the two brothers to fight for time for the others. Madame Yu's tears fell in a moment, and almost fainted as she pulled Luo Ling's hands. "How can one let the two of you stay here?" Madame Ma shook her head. "We are one family. If we are to leave, we will leave together." This deadlock could not be resolved. Shen Miao shook her head and spat out two words. "No." Chapter 435. Biao youngest sister. What exactly are you talking about? Luo Qian could not help but ask. Shen Miao swept her eyes across everyone and said, "In the Shaochun city, the Luo family has the largest military strength. The leaders of the city guards are also older brother Ling and older brother Sa. The two Zhu are also clear about this point, so if they were to really attack the city, in order to boost morale, they would definitely deal with the Luo family first. As long as the Luo family is destroyed, the citizens of the Shaochun city would definitely lose their fighting spirit and be captured. If I am the two Zhu, even if I have to use all means, I will deal with the Luo family first. It is impossible for the Luo family to escape unscathed." Exposing the terrible reality without any concealment, Luo Tan could not help but tremble and looked at Luo Ling. "Eldest brother. Is what she said true?" Luo Ling stared at Shen Miao. "Correct." Luo Sa's anger suddenly rose. "This cannot be done, that cannot be done. Since one cannot escape, and the two Zhu have brought troops over, why not fight it out with them? Our Luo family has never produced a coward before, so why would we be afraid of them? There is no need to be anxious." Shen Miao suddenly spoke. The hall was silent for a moment before Luo Ling looked at Shen Miao and softly said, "Does Biao youngest sister have a brilliant plan?" "Cannot be considered as brilliant." Shen Miao's brows were calm. She was born delicate and pretty, and in the midst of all the anxious emotions, only her expression was indifferent. Everyone then discovered that from the beginning till now, Shen Miao had not shown any other emotions. The Shaochun city was at the borders, and would panic when the two Jews suddenly entered the city, but Shen Miao was a pampered young lady who had been sleeping comfortably in the Ding capital, and was not surprised at all. The two Jews have brought their troops, but did not advance for a long time. It is obvious that they are hesitant and have some scruples. I think that after so many years, even though the Luo family's army had dispersed, the remaining prestige is still there, and can still be some deterrence. Their hearts are hesitant and probe before advancing. Even the commander is not certain, so one can make use of it. Madame Ma and Madame Yu did not understand Shen Miao's words, but felt that Shen Miao's words were very reasonable, so they did not speak for a moment and quietly listened to her. Luo Sa frowned and asked, "How to make use of it?" "Let's buy some time," Shen Miao lightly replied. "My father and mother, Waizu and Jiujiu, are not ordinary people, and one think that they would soon discover that something is wrong here. And once they discover that something is wrong, they would quickly rush back to the Shaochun city. Before that, all we need to do is delay the footsteps of this end." "But how do we delay it?" Luo Tan had an impatient personality and impatiently asked. "Based on what you've said, the Turks are so smart that they know that time is of the essence, and will quickly attack. What are they afraid of? Just show them what they want to see." Shen Miao smiled gently. "What they are afraid of is that the Luo family's army actually still have surplus strength. So let them see the surplus strength of the Luo family's army." "Biao, youngest sister," Luo Qian said anxiously, "where are we going to get the Luo family army now?" Shen Miao smiled gently. "This will require everyone's cooperation. But before that, one do not know if both older brothers believe in me." She looked at Luo Ling and Luo Sa. It was clearly a very gentle and humble attitude, but there was a faint hostility. Luo Ling looked at her seriously. "I believe you." Outside of the Shaochun city's city tower, it was already very dilapidated, and there was a lot of dirt and dust accumulated over the years, which was the mark of time. There were generations of people here, and there were also generations of heroic generals who guarded the peace and tranquility of the Shaochun city. But just like how cracks would appear on the brick walls of the city, the once indestructible doors would gradually decay. At this moment on the city tower, there were not many guards walking back and forth, as they stared vigilantly at the gradually clearer sounds of horse hooves and torches. Big drops of cold sweat trickled down their cheeks. Chapter 436. The two Jews were savage by nature, and it was impossible for them, who had been slacking for many years, to go against them. And from the movements there were quite a number of two Jews. The fear was mutual, and in a moment, the footsteps of the city guards became much heavier. Just when the people not far away were ready to move, someone from the city guards suddenly shouted, "What is that?" Even the sound of the heavy rain in the rainy night could not cover the surprise in the words. Everyone looked back, and saw that in the Shaochun city, one did not know when large and small torches had appeared. These torches were densely packed, and accompanied with the sound of the sky shaking noises. If one listened carefully, there was even the sound of horses. When the two armies confronted each other, naturally there would be spies who climbed high to inquire about the news in the city. The city guards standing at the city gates could see it, and the two Jews spies outside could also see it. Those inexplicable men and horses that appeared were especially clear in the rainy night, and the sky shaking shouts along with the messy sounds of the horses galloping on the ground, accompanied by the wind and rain. There was an unstoppable magnificence of thousands of troops and horses. "It is the Luo family's army! It is the Luo family's army!" Someone from the city guard shouted and almost kneeled down in joy. "The Luo family's army has regained its glory." The 100-year-old Luo family had been declining for many years, and the Luo family's army that remained in these years were all small businesses. The sudden shout made everyone recall the invincible grace of Luo Sui's army in the past. It was as if there was a new hope, and the morale soared in an instant. The few men and horses in the city guards pulled out their swords and looked around. The blood and heat in their bones seemed to be ignited, and the shouts from their mouths, along with those inexplicable men and horses in the city, rushed towards the Milky Way. The first drumbeat of energy, the second weak, and the third exhausted. This sudden surge in morale, and the sudden appearance of more men and horses with the name of Luo family, obviously shocked the two Jew. The Turks angrily communicated with each other, and the soldiers paused, not daring to approach. After 2 hours of this stalemate, the Turks began to sense that something was wrong. Suddenly, the sounds of fighting came from outside. This time it was a real army. Enchanting and his men had returned. Even though the two Jews' men and horses were spirited, but they were not as experienced as Luo Sui and Enchanting, who had been fighting on the battlefield for many years. Their formation was at a disadvantage, and they were quickly defeated. In the Shaochun city, at the entrance of the Luo residence, when Luo Ling heard that the soldier in front had returned to report, he then heaved a sigh of relief and respectfully bowed to Xin Miao. This time it is all thanks to younger Biao's sister. Biao youngest sister is so smart, Luo Qian exclaimed. To think of such an idea. Shen Miao let Shen Xang gather all the useful people in the residence, and then gather the commoners on the streets, and lit all the torches that could be used. One person held 2 torches, and then let the blacksmiths use horseshoes to imitate the sound of the horses' hooves hitting the ground. The commoners of the Shaochun city also knew that it was a critical moment of life and death, so they pretended to shout like the soldiers. In addition to the strong wind and rain that night, it was more than enough to deceive the two Jews outside. When the two Jews saw so many torches, they would subconsciously think that there were so many people. The sound of the horses' hooves and the shouts, in addition to the fear of the Luo family's army, would make them think that there was still a portion of the Luo family's forces guarding the Shaochun city. The two Jews had fear in their hearts, and did not dare to blindly move forward. They tried to probe and stall for time. As long as they wait for Enchanting's return, everything would be settled by Enchanting and the rest. It looked simple, but in a critical situation, it was easy for one to lose their sense of propriety. So how would one think of such a method? Luo Sa's attitude towards Shen Miao also changed a lot. This time it is all thanks to you. Ever since Shen Miao came up with this idea, Luo Tan was filled with admiration towards Shen Miao. At this moment, when she saw that the plan was effective, she pulled Shen Miao's arm and asked, Biao youngest sister, honestly confess, did you secretly read the art of war? I remember that the military books in grandfather's study seemed to be what you said. Chapter 437. Shen Miao smiled. Just opportunistic. Jiao Jiao, do not be modest. Madame Ma looked at her warmly and said, if not for you today, we would all be in trouble. You not only saved the people in our residence, but also the people of the Shaochun city. Thank you. Shen Miao could not help but laugh in her heart. In fact, she was really not modest, as it was just an opportunistic matter. In the past lifetime, such a thing also happened, but Shen Miao could not remember the exact date, and only knew that it was a rainy day with hail. When the two Jews attacked the Shaochun city, even though at the end Luo Sui managed to rush back with his troops, and saved the Shaochun city from being captured, but they also paid a heavy price. In the Shaochun city, there were numerous casualties, and it was very miserable. At that time, in order to gain Fu Xiuyi's favor, she was working hard to learn the art of war. She had also asked Pei Lang about this matter, and Pei Lang had given her the same answer that day. Pei Lang said, the Turks have some misgivings, they do not dare to advance rashly. Fighting them head-on is futile, and they have lost the will to escape. It would be better for them to use the empty city stratagem to confuse the enemy. As long as they can delay until reinforcements arrive, they will be able to solve the problem. She had recorded Pei Lang's words in her diary, and it was now very clear. Shen Miao knew that she did not have any military tactics, but she believed in Pei Lang. In those years in the inner palace, in order to gain Fu Xiuyi's favor and consult with Fu Xiuyi's aides, she finally had a lot of unexpected chips. Those were all gifts that Fu Xiuyi gave her. Little cousin is so bad. When Luo Qian heard the reports of success from the guards outside, his uneasiness finally dissipated, and he started to tease Shen Miao. Obviously you already had a well-thought-out plan, but you still scared us like that previously, causing us to really end up in such a bad situation. Scared me to death. Luo Tan slapped her on the head. Shameful. You can't even compare to a little girl. Aren't you the same? Luo Qian retorted. Shen Miao smiled and declined to comment. She naturally knew that it would be solved in the end, but she deliberately made it so serious, to let everyone in the Luo family understand that just by relying on the remaining Luo family army, not to mention protecting the Shaochun city, it would be difficult to protect the Luo family. If one didn't have enough power in this world, one wouldn't be able to protect the people they wanted to protect. The Turks were eyeing them covetously, and it was only a matter of time before they made a comeback. When that day comes, what will the Luo family do? Only when they were truly aware of the danger would the Luo family feel nervous. The younger generation of the Luo family, Luo Lianying and Luo Liantai, even Madame Ma and Madame Yu, would spare no effort to urge Luo Sui to reorganize the Luo family's army. As for Luo Sui himself, he had eyes to see and ears to listen. There would always be a time when the scale in his heart would tilt. It was impossible for Shen Miao alone to persuade a stubborn person like Luo Sui, and because of her identity, it would inevitably make Luo Sui have some misgivings, but it was different for the Luo family. Sometimes, when you want to achieve something, don't use the most direct method. You need to be tactful. In her previous life, whatever Shen Miao wanted, she would directly say it and do it, and in the end, she would lose miserably. On the contrary, Mei Foran's method of twisting and turning was exceptionally brilliant. She hated Mei Foran, but wanted to learn from Mei Foran what she did not have. At the dawn of the second day, the Shaochun city finally calmed down. In this battle, the two Zhu were defeated miserably. Originally because of Shen Miao's empty city stratagem in the Shaochun city, it made the two Zhu bewildered, and with the addition of Shen Exan and Shen Qiu, they suffered an unprecedented heavy blow and retreated to the depths of the grasslands. One think that for a long period of time, they would not have the energy to make a comeback. Even though they had won the battle, the atmosphere in the Shaochun city was not relaxed, especially the entire Luo residents. The two Zhu entering the city this time meant that Shen Miao's frightening conjectures in the past few days had finally become a reality. With such a terrifying neighbor eyeing them all day long, no one would be able to sleep peacefully. Chapter 438. After knowing that the empty city stratagem was thought of by Shen Miao, Luo Sui had a higher opinion of Shen Miao. Shen Xian was naturally proud, and repeatedly praised that his daughter could not be compared to a man. 2 days later, Luo Sui announced in front of everyone in the Luo family that he wanted to reorganize the Luo family's army. The entire Shaochun city cheered and jumped in joy as they spread the news. Even the younger generation of the Luo family were extremely excited. Only Shen Miao's expression was calm, as this was already expected. The night of the two Jews' surprise attack would make Luo Sui determine that rather than being chased, it would be better to make a comeback while he was still young. As for the matter of money, Luo Shuiyan still had some savings, and as for the people to train the soldiers, Shen Qiu and Shen Xian were worried that there was no place for them to use their skills, so naturally they happily agreed. It was not an easy matter to recruit all of those brave generals who had long removed their armors and returned back to train the troops, but the Luo family were all brave generals. Since they had done it, naturally they were determined. In a moment, the Shaochun city became lively. The days passed peacefully and satisfactorily. One day, Shen Miao was sitting at the table reading when Luo Tan rushed in and almost knocked over the chair at the door. Guyu jumped in shock. Shen Miao looked at her, and before she could speak, she saw Luo Tan panting and stroking her chest. "Biao, younger sister, have you heard?" "What?" Shen Miao asked. "That little marquis of the Xie clan." Luo Tan gestured in a flurry. "It's the little marquis of the Xie family that I mentioned to you before. The one who is as famous as cousin Qiu. Didn't he ask to be the marshal to go to the northern borderline to resist the enemy?" Shen Miao's heart jumped, and she looked at Luo Tan and slowly nodded her head. "I know. You've heard the news from before, right? That young Marquis Xie has been winning battles all day, and the Xiongnu have been forced to the edge of the desert. Luo Tan said. Everyone is saying that when little Marquis Xie returns to the capital, one fear that his meritorious service would be higher than the Marquis of Linen, and His Majesty would definitely reward him with a high official position. These words were not false. Not long after Shen Miao reached the Shaochun city, Xie Jingxing also led the Xie family's army to the northern border. The bravery that Xie Jingxing displayed on the battlefield caused people to click their tongues in amazement. Whether it was arranging troops or fighting alone with the enemy leader, the fierceness and coldness that he displayed made the enemy tremble in fear upon hearing his name. They originally thought that Xie Jingxing would not be able to subdue the Xie family's army, but the Xie family's army had performed miraculous feats in Xie Jingxing's hands. This finally made people put away the last shred of doubt towards Xie Jingxing. Everyone said that Xie Jingxian would be the most outstanding male in Mingqi, and in the future his achievements would be above the Marquis of Linen. When Shen Xian and Luo Sui occasionally talked about this matter, they were full of praises for Xie Jingxing, saying that he was a rare talent in the world. Because Shen Miao knew of Xie Jingxing's ability in her previous life, she was not surprised at all. She patiently listened to Luo Tan's words, but she saw that Luo Tan's eyes were red, and an ominous premonition rushed into her heart. She asked softly, "What's wrong with you?" "Dead." Luo Tan could not hold it in and her tears fell. Little Marquis Xie is dead. In Luo Tan's heart, Xie Jingxing was a hero like Xinqiu, and she worshipped him very much. At this moment her tears could not be stopped. That little Marquis Xie was surrounded by the enemy from the back yesterday, and thousands of arrows pierced through his heart. His corpse was hung on the city walls and skinned to show to the public. Luo Tan cried, "Biao youngest sister, he is dead! He is dead!" The teacup in Jingzhi's hands fell to the ground with a bang, and she immediately looked at Shen Miao in panic. Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing had some friendship, so if Xie Jingxing was dead, what would be Shen Miao's reaction? What would be Shen Miao's reaction? Shen Miao sat in front of the table and quietly looked at the crying Luo Tan. Her expression was so calm that it was scary, as if what Luo Tan said was not an extraordinary event, but ordinary words like the weather was good and the flowers were blooming well. It was just that the more peaceful her eyes were, the tighter her grip on the book in front of her was. Did Xie Jingxing die? Thousands of arrows pierced through his heart, skinned to dry, and hung on the city walls to show to the public. It was the same ending as in the previous lifetime. Was it really Xie Jingxing? Shen Miao thought absent-mindedly, as if she was trying to distinguish if this news was a joke or reality. However, what floated in her mind was that day in the courtyard of Guangwentang, when glutinous rice dumpling tricked her out to talk, and the tall and handsome youth that walked out from the forest. That youth was wearing an ivory white embroidered robe with silver threads. He was handsome and arrogant as he elegantly walked towards her step by step. His lips hooked up into a mischievous smile, and his peach blossom eyes had a smile that was not a smile that was very intoxicating. It was 30% frivolous, 60% probing, and the remaining 10% was a youth's romantic. "So it is you," he said. Chapter 439. In the late spring season, the grasses were long and the orioles were flying. Wherever the pitter-patter of rain fell, even the flowers were wet red. The entire small town was filled with the unique fragrance of spring, and even the sandstorm seemed to have lessened. The rainwater dripped down from the eaves and created small puddles on the green flagstones. The clear drops splashed up and seemed to be pitiful and adorable. In the birdcage hanging on the beam, the orioles were chirping, and the crisp sound of the rain mixed together was more beautiful than the music played by the best musicians. At the end of the corridor, a young female ran over in a hurry. This young female was wearing a peach-pink embroidered horse skirt, and the color was bright and adorable, but her hands were holding onto the hem of the skirt as she rushed over, which was somewhat comical. She had wheat-colored skin and was lively and mischievous as she shouted, "Biao youngest sister! Biao youngest sister! Older sister, slow down!" The youth following behind her shouted loudly, "The ground is slippery, be careful not to fall." Just as he finished speaking, the lively young female who was running in front staggered and almost fell down. Luckily she had some martial arts skills, and with a light tap of her toes, she steadied her body. She angrily turned back and complained to the youth. Luo Qian, shut your crow mouth. Luo Qian stuck out his tongue, and behind Luo Qian, two slender figures appeared, and a dissatisfied voice sounded. Luo Tan, be careful that you will not be able to get married like this. Older brother saw. Luo Tan anxiously stomped her feet. If I am not able to get married, I will marry older brother Qiu. Luo Qian scoffed. Older brother Qiu will not take an interest in a tigress like you. Luo Qian. Luo Tan made a posture to hit him. Enough. Stop messing around. It was the gentle youth who was walking at the back who smiled. Aren't you going to look for Biao youngest sister to talk? Go in. When they went to the innermost courtyard, they saw Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang moving the flowers and plants outside. When they saw them, they quickly said, Young lady is waiting for you in the room. Luo Tan lifted the curtain and shouted, Biao youngest sister. There was no incense in the room, but the maidservants found a few sprigs of jasmine from somewhere. The room was filled with the sweet fragrance of flowers. A young girl was sitting in front of the window. She was dressed in a dark black brocade robe with fine cloud and goose feathers. She wore a purple skirt with emerald patterns. The color was very dark, but it didn't make her look old at all. Instead, it made her skin look as translucent as jade. It was drizzling in front of the window. When she heard the noise, she raised her head slightly, revealing a delicate and pretty face. Her eyes were dark and spirited, her eyebrows were elegant, her lips were red, and her teeth were as enchanting as a new moon. Speaking of which, it was quite strange. This young lady's appearance was very delicate, like the morning clouds reflecting the snow, making people feel pity for her. However, her eyes and brows were gentle and combed, giving her a sense of elegance. It was as if he was a person who could bear the burden of magnanimity. Under that calm demeanor, if one looked closely, there seemed to be a hardness that was completely different from his appearance. She looked weak, but was actually very strong. She tilted her head and smiled. Her eyes were quick-witted, but it also made people's hearts tremble. It was as if her casual smile had turned the originally simple study into a palace carved with flowers and jade. And she was a noble sitting on a high seat, looking down at everyone with an indifferent gaze. The few people at the door were slightly startled. Even though they had seen it many times, they would occasionally be shocked by this young lady's unintentional elegance. There was a ghostly aura lingering around her every move, and this was roughly the reason. After being stunned for a moment, Luo Tan was the first to react. With a flick of her hand, she ran in and said, Biao youngest sister, your dress is really beautiful. She was after all a young lady. No matter how naughty and mischievous she usually was, her love for beauty was still the same. Shen Miao smiled gently. If you like it, then let the tailor make another set. Chapter 440. Luo Tan's lips twitched. I am unable to wear this color, and can only be envious. She sized up Shen Miao and sighed. No wonder all the gentlemen in the Shaochun city kept asking about you from older brother Ling and the rest. Biao youngest sister, you are getting more and more beautiful. This was the 71st year of Ming Qi. 2 years had passed, and in these 2 years, Shen Miao was also slowly growing up. That slightly childish face gradually showed a delicate contour, and even the cute facial features became more refined. It was just that gentle temperament did not change, and even became smoother. But the more it was like this, the deeper the magnanimity. The temperament of walking on the road attracted people to look back frequently. No wonder Luo Ling and Luo Sa's brothers would secretly inquire if Shen Miao was married. After all, even though there were beauties in the Shaochun city, but a beauty with such a unique temperament was one of a kind. Of course, just look at whose Biao youngest sister she is. Luo Qian proudly stepped forward and placed his hand on the desk in front of Shen Miao. Biao youngest sister, do you know that His Majesty sent people to send money over again? Got a reward? As Shen Miao spoke, she kept the book on the table. Luo Qian's eyes were sharp and saw the name of the book and said curiously, Qing Country Records? How does Biao youngest sister look at Qing Country's things? Just casually take a look. Shen Miao answered without much care. Luo Sa's eyes slightly flashed. Luo Ling stared at Shen Miao and softly said, "There were countless of rewards in 1 year, and recently the rewards are too frequent. What does Biao youngest sister think is the reason?" He very naturally sought advice from Shen Miao, as if he did not think that it was worth being ashamed to seek advice from a young lady who was much younger than him. Of course, the 4 juniors in the room would not laugh at her. How much ability did Shen Miao have was a question worth exploring. But the 4 of them had a tacit understanding not to tell the Luo family's elders about Shen Miao's mysteriousness, as if they firmly believed that even if Shen Miao had any secrets, she would definitely not harm the Luo family. "There must be a demon when things are abnormal," Shen Miao said. "The Son of Heaven is overly suspicious, and with the rapid rise of the Luo family's army, one would only suppress them quietly, but the frequent rewards seem to be spreading one's name. That is a request." She pondered for a moment. His Majesty has a request for the Luo family's army, or is deliberately raising the status of the Luo family's army. As for the request, what is the request? Ming Qi's tribute ceremony is about to begin. Everyone was stunned. Luo Tan rubbed her chin and said, "It seems so. When the Ming Qi pays tribute, the Qing country and the Great Liang will send people over. The Qing country and the Ming Qi are evenly matched, and the Great Liang is far stronger than the Ming Qi. His Majesty will also be afraid," Shen Miao lightly said. "The Shen family army is not around, and the Xie family army is heavily injured. Ming Qi does not have a country guarding military general. How can this be? That's why His Majesty wants to elevate the Luo family to deter the Qin kingdom and the Liang dynasty." Luo Tan quickly replied. Shen Miao nodded her head. "So it is like this," Luo Qian said, and looked at Shen Miao with some admiration. She was obviously of the same age as him, but Luo Qian always had a feeling that Shen Miao was much older than him, and was even more mature and steady than Luo Ling. Shen Miao would never avoid the analysis of the imperial court's forces. Compared to the elders who were tactful and tangled, Shen Miao was much more ruthless and direct. For example, the words that the Son of Heaven is overly suspicious, the elders would never say it. The younger generation of the Luo family liked to play with Shen Miao and sincerely accept her. Naturally, it was because Shen Miao had something that was extremely attractive on her. Perhaps the people of the Ding capital were more knowledgeable than the people of the Shaochun city, as Shen Miao would always know some things that they did not know. This is not necessarily a good thing. Luo Sa frowned. The higher one is held up, the more painful the fall. Chapter 441. Correct, Shen Miao said. But it is also an opportunity. What kind of opportunity does younger Biao's sister think it is? Luo Ling asked with a smile. It's not easy for the Luo family's army to improve in the past 2 years. His Majesty has the heart to support them. Although the greater the contribution, the more dangerous it was. The Luo family army already had the strength to not be bullied. For the past 2 years, the Luo family army had been trained by the Luo family, and not the emperor. This was the Luo family's military strength and not Ming Qi's. His Majesty is supporting the people of the Luo family. As long as you insist on this point, it will be fine. All under the heavens was the king's land. All under the king's command were the king's subjects. But Shen Miao had clearly divided the Luo family and Ming Qi into 2 sides. If it was heard by Luo Sui, one feared that he would faint from anger. These treasonous words were clearly preparation for a rebellion. However, when the Luo family's younger generation heard that, while they were surprised, they did not feel angry. Unlike their ancestors, when the Luo family's juniors were born, the Luo family was already in dire straits. The royal family did not allocate any silver to the Luo family's army, and had forgotten about the Luo family's army at the border. The juniors were not without complaints. The more he complained, the less obvious his loyalty would be. After a moment of silence, there was a touch of fanaticism in Luo Sa's eyes as he said, Biao youngest sister said it very well. His temperament was violent and impulsive, completely different from Luo Ling's gentleness, and would rarely praise anyone. Now that he was praising her, it was obvious that he agreed with Shen Miao's words. Luo Ling was more steady, but even so, he did not object. Luo Qian's and Luo Tan's temperament were lively, and there was no reason for them to believe Shen Miao's words. Thus they did not say anything bad. Thus with this reward from Emperor Wen Hui, the younger generation of the Luo family almost reached a consensus. It was a good thing, and there was no need to dissuade. Speaking of which, Luo Tan leaned on the table and looked at Shen Miao. Youngest Biao's sister is now 16, and yesterday one of my sisters came over to ask me if you have a family to marry. If not, take a look at her older brother. Biaomei, do you want to see him? The people of the Shaochun city were open and simple, and if there was a young lady that one fancied, one could inquire through friends and relatives. Luo Qian said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Biao's youngest sister is only 16, and there is no rush. But you are already 18. Why don't you worry about yourself? What's there to be anxious about?" Luo Tan flipped her hair. "I'm so pretty and smart. Even when I'm 80 years old, there will still be people proposing marriage to me. I am just worried about Biaomei. Biaomei is so delicate and weak that people are always thinking about her. It is better to find a husband to protect her. Luo Qian, if you continue to be so violent, I guarantee that no lady will marry you in the future." "Who said that there is no young lady who wants to marry me?" Luo Qian was not convinced. Even if it is not possible, there is still youngest Biao's sister. Biao's youngest sister has a good heart. When that day comes, you will definitely marry me and help me out of trouble, right? He walked forward with a thick face. Luo Tan slapped his face away and said, "Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? If Biao's youngest sister really wants to marry, our residence's older brother Ling and older brother Sa are not married yet. Who isn't better than you? If you don't believe me, you can ask brother Ling and brother Sa if they are willing to marry Biaomei." These words were inadvertently turned to Luo Ling and Luo Sa. Luo Ling was surprised for a moment, and his face turned slightly red. Luo Sa also lightly coughed twice and turned his head away. The atmosphere was somewhat awkward for a moment. Luo Tan was totally unaware of it, and asked with a smile while holding her cheeks, "Biao's youngest sister, say it. What kind of male do you like? Handsome? Rich in silver? Good martial arts? Able to compose poems?" Shen Miao looked at Luo Tan. Even though the three men in the room were looking at other places, their ears were perked up. Shen Miao said, "Able to beat my eldest brother." Chapter 442. With a bang sound, Luo Qian's feet slipped and fell down as he cried out in grievance, "No, no. Older brother Qiu's martial arts is so good. Who can be compared to him?" Coincidentally, at one end, one side was talking about Shen Miao's sweetheart. At the other end, there were people talking about Shen Miao's marriage. In the small room, Madame Ma, Madame Yu and Luo Shuiyan were talking. Different from the Shen residence in the Ding capital, the Luo family's sisters-in-law got along very well. Madame Yu was gentle and honest. Madame Ma was shrewish, and Luo Shuiyan had the temperament of a military officer, straightforward and efficient. The three females got along very well in these 2 years. Madame Yu held an invitation in her hand and said to Luo Shuiyan, "This is an invitation from Zhang Furen in the city, asking us to visit the Zhang residence." Speaking till here, she hesitated for a moment before saying, "One must also bring Jiao Jiao along." Madame Ma laughed when she heard it. "I say that Zhang Furen usually look down on us martial artists, just because there is a top scorer in her residence. How would such a person with eyes at the top of her head send an invitation to us? So it is because the drunkard's intention is not on the wine, and came to see Jiao Jiao." Madame Ma nudged Luo Shuiyan with her elbow. "Youngest Gu, this Jiao Jiao now has more face than our father." As Shen Miao grew older, she became more beautiful, and there were a number of people in the Shaochun city who came to inquire about Shen Miao's marriage. Previously everyone did not know the temperament of the young ladies in the Ding capital, and thinking of those rumors, one feared that she was the eldest young lady who caused trouble in heaven and earth. Who knew that in these 2 years, Shen Miao's temperament was very calm, and as compared to those impetuous young ladies, it was to the liking of those Furens. Especially that gentle and magnanimous bearing. One could not help but think that if Shen Miao became the matriarch of the household, she would definitely be able to control the residence. In addition, Shen Miao's looks were not bad, and the Luo family was famous in the Shaochun city. In these 2 years, the Luo family's army was reinvigorated, and the Luo family was like a fragrant cake. The matchmakers almost broke the Luo family's doorstep. Speaking till here, Madame Ma was half jealous and half envious as she said, "One family having a daughter, hundreds of families would seek after her. This is really good, unlike our family's Tanner. Really such a grown-up young lady, yet she is always fooling around. Not to mention a marriage proposal, there isn't even a matchmaker. If this goes on, could it be that she's going to be an old maid at home?" Ma Sure was originally just joking, but who knew that as she spoke, she really became a bit worried. Luo Shuiyin persuaded, "It is good that Tanner is lively. There will always be a suitable family sister-in-law. Why are you so anxious? As for Jiao Jiao, she's only 16 years old. But why does she look more mature than a 60-year-old woman? Her temperament isn't like mine, nor is it like her father. I don't know who she took after. What is little aunt worrying about?" Madame Ma didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There aren't many young ladies like Jiao Jiao now. Look at her temperament. Just by sitting there, who wouldn't say she's full of nobility? If you ask me, I'm afraid even the Empress in the palace wouldn't have such an imposing manner. That's why I said that Jiao Jiao's bearing is innate. Correct. Madam, you also praised. Sister-in-law and I have stayed in the Shaochun city for so many years, and those old people in the aristocratic families definitely do not have Jiao Jiao's bearing. Luo Shuiyin shook her head and sighed. It was good that she was obedient and sensible, but for such a young temperament to be so calm, it made one feel somewhat worried. Luo Shuiyin would rather Shen Miao had a cheerful temperament like Luo Tan, and watch the bustle, but have the liveliness that a young lady should have. Speaking of which, Madam Yu said seriously, Jiao Jiao is 16 this year. If she does not return to the Ding capital, sooner or later she would have to marry. Does little aunt have a suitable candidate in mind? Previously Jiao Jiao was young, but now she is 16, and should be at the age to talk about marriage. Now all the families in the Shaochun city want to marry Jiao Jiao home. Is there no one that little aunt likes? Chapter 443. Luo Shuiyin was surprised for a moment. She was used to being carefree, and it was her own bold and proactive choice to be together with Shen Xian. She had never asked others to look at her face like a normal female, thus she did not think about this. When she heard Madame Yu mention this, she was somewhat stunned. After a moment, Luo Shuiyin then said, "This still depends on Jiao Jiao's intention. Youngest Gu, you are really willing to let a young lady like Jiao Jiao marry?" Madame Ma sighed. So intelligent and not irritated, with a personality that makes one dote on her. If it was me, one would definitely not be willing to let her marry out and raise her for a lifetime. Different from the aristocratic families in the Ding capital, the people in the Shaochun city would not think that it was better for a female to marry out as early as possible. On the contrary, they felt that the longer a female stayed in the residence, the more pampered they would be. Madame Ma said, "Speaking of which, Linger and Saer have reached the age of marrying a wife. Why not Jiao Jiao marry into our own family?" Madame Ma asked probingly. She had a sudden whim, but Madame Yu's eyes lit up when she heard it. She, who usually spoke softly, for the first time could not wait to speak. "That is also all right. I see that Linger and Saer like Jiao Jiao, especially Saer. You all know that Saer usually does not even have the patience to look at young ladies. But these 2 years he would often run over to Jiao Jiao's room. Their relationship as cousins is very good, and I know my own son that Saer definitely likes Jiao Jiao in his heart." Luo Shuiyin opened her mouth, but before she could speak, she saw Madame Yu shaking her head. But Saer is impulsive and does not know how to dote on others. If Jiao Jiao were to marry over, I fear that she would be wronged, and that fellow is a blockhead. It is still Linger who is the best. Linger has a gentle temperament and is slightly older. The last time the cousins went on an outing together. Speaking of which, there were a number of people who came to Linger for marriage these few years, but Linger himself did not fancy one, thus I cannot say much about him. Linger definitely likes Jiao Jiao. Otherwise he would not look for Jiao Jiao to talk after leaving the army. Madame Ma was not happy when Madame Yu spoke to herself, and was not to be outdone. Eldest saw. How can it be calculated like this? According to what you said, our families Qian'er and Jiao Jiao's age are similar. They were about the same age, and usually played well together. Although Qian'er was a little mischievous, she was more considerate. Playing together with Jiao Jiao like this was the best. There is also our family's Tanner. Tanner and Qiu'er are a pair. In this case, they can be even closer. Finishing, Masher looked at Luo Shuiyan. Youngest Gu, what do you think? Luo Shuiyan. Two pairs of ardent eyes looked at her. Luo Shuiyan braced herself and said, "This still depends on the children's intentions." She did not expect that Madame Yu and Madame Ma would have such thoughts. But when Luo Shuiyan thought about it carefully, she did not feel that it was bad. First of all, they were all part of the same family. The younger generation of the Luo clan all had good characters and good looks. This was exactly what she liked. The official position does not need to be too high. The money does not need to be too much. The most important thing is to treat Shen Miao well, and place Shen Miao in his heart. She had also experienced it from the side of a young girl in love, not to mention Shen Qiu's side. Even these few sons of the Luo family. Luo Ling was gentle, Luo Sa was brave, Luo Qian was cheerful, and the most important thing was that they were kind-hearted. If Shen Miao was good with any one of them, the days in the future would only be sweet and not bitter. But Luo Shuiyan still had to depend on Shen Miao's intentions. She also did not know what kind of person Shen Miao liked. Originally she knew that Shen Miao liked those like Fu Xiuyi. But in these 2 years, Shen Miao did not mention about Fu Xiuyi at all, which made her gradually put her heart at ease. But her own daughter had such a dull temperament, thus Luo Shuiyan was worried. Why not find an opportunity to ask Jiao Jiao's intentions? Madame Ma hurriedly said, "If Jiao Jiao really fancy one of our family, no matter who it is, our Luo family would burn incense and have good luck. It is better to settle the marriage early, so that the sons will be smart, and the daughters will be beautiful." Chapter 444. Luo Shuiyan was somewhat embarrassed by what she said and rebuked. "Sister-in-law, how can there be a logic of the youngest marrying first?" Madame Ma waved her hands. "I am afraid that Jiao Jiao will be taken by someone else first." Just as they were talking and laughing, one suddenly saw a servant at the door reporting, "Foreign, there is a message from the palace." The general asked Furens to quickly go to the front hall. "Did the people from the palace just leave? Why are they here again? Did they send the rewards?" Madame Ma got up and casually asked. "It seems that it is to ask Shingai to return to the capital." The servant answered. Luo Shuiyan's actions of getting up stiffened. The front hall of the Luo residence was in a mess. It was not that the people in the hall were in a mess, but the people's hearts were in a mess. Emperor Wen Hui's imperial edict wanted Shen Xian to bring his family back to the capital and restore the title of formidable great general. He also said to return the Shen family's army's tiger tally to Shen Xian. 2 years ago Emperor Wen Hui had given Shen Xian a slap in front of the world, and now he was giving him a sweet date to eat in such a big way. But it was another matter if Shen Xian was willing to eat this sweet date or not. Luo Sui sat on the high seat. For the past 2 years, because of the reorganization of the Luo family's army, he had to worry a lot, and there were more white hairs on his temples. But his prestige did not diminish. Perhaps it was because of his fighting spirit that he looked more like a general. He said, "Ming Qi's tribute is about to begin. His Majesty wants you to return to the capital, so that you can rush back before the tribute." Tribute in 100 years. A dynasty would have a tribute every 100 years, and the previous tribute of Ming Qi was almost exploited by the Qing country. At that time the late emperor relied on the Xie and Shen families to barely get through. Now other than the Qing country, even the Great Liang court had come. If one were to say that the Qing country only made the Ming Qi fearful, then the Great Liang court was enough to make the Ming Qi afraid. The Great Liang was located in the south, and the country was rich and powerful, with a strong army and horses. Emperor Yongle was a wise ruler, and was different from the Ming Qi's chaotic court. The Great Liang appointed people based on merit, and there were more loyal people. If the Great Liang had ambitions, it was only a matter of time before they annexed the Ming Qi. It was just that Emperor Yonglu did not have this intention for so many years. Of course, there was another possibility that Emperor Yonglu wanted to destroy the Qin country and Ming-Chi at the same time to unify the world. The world that has been divided for a long time must be united for a long time must be divided for a long time. The days of separation between the three kingdoms of Qin, Liang, and Qi would eventually be broken one day. It was just that one did not know when that day would come. It was obvious that Emperor Wenhui was not willing to see this day when he was alive. But after Xie Jingxing's death, Xie Ding no longer had any interest in politics. Only the remaining Shen family had their tiger tally seized and rushed to the Shaochun city. No one knew if Emperor Wenhui regretted it, but at the moment, Emperor Wenhui hoped that Shen Xian could support the situation. Especially when Shen Xian helped Luo Sui to reorganize the abandoned Luo family's army. One could see Shen Xian's outstanding ability to lead troops. Emperor Wenhui was expressing one meaning. Ming-Chi needed Shen Xian. He would appear when needed, and silently retreat when not needed. Perhaps the Shen Xian of the past had such an awareness, but the Shen Xian who had been mercilessly treated by the royal family might not be so selfless. A scholar would die for his bosom friend. Could the imperial family of Ming-Chi be considered as bosom friends? You should go back. Luo Sui said. Shen Xian, take back all the things that you have lost. Let them see what kind of person the Luo family's son-in-law and the Shen family's son is. Shen Miao jerked her head up. She had expected that Emperor Wenhui would summon Shen Xian back to the capital after 2 years, and also expected that the situation in the Ding capital would have earth-shattering changes. But she did not expect that the usually old-fashioned and dignified Grand General Luo would actually say such treacherous words. She slightly opened her eyes, and when this look fell into Luo Sui's eyes, Luo Sui smiled and looked at her. Girl, you also think so. Am I right? Everyone's eyes in the hall landed on Shen Miao. Luo Lianying's and Luo Liantai's expressions slightly moved, but in the end they did not say anything. Shen Miao sighed in her heart. Her little bit of skills could not be hidden from Luo Sui, this kind of all-powerful veteran general. Luo Sui had a pair of eyes that had seen the world. Perhaps from the beginning, when the Luo family's army was reorganized, he had faintly guessed what she was planning. She was grateful for Luo Sui's trust and support. The feeling of having a family member behind her was really good. Shen Miao looked at Luo Sui and her lips curled up. Yes, maternal grandfather. Luo Sui laughed out loud. Luo Ling looked at Shen Miao, and there seemed to be a slight smile floating in his eyes. Luo Sa's lips also pulled up. Luo Tan and Luo Qian looked at each other, and had a somewhat puzzled look. Luo Shuiyan's and Shen Qiu's eyes were complicated. After leaving the Ding capital for 2 years now, was it time to return? Take back the things that were lost. Military strength, momentum, reputation and dignity. One must let them see what the real Shen family was like. A tiger would not become a dog just because it fell off the cliff. A dragon that swam in the water would one day soar to the 9 heavens. Shen Xian cupped his hands towards Luo Sui and said, Listen to General's teachings. Chapter 445. The road from the Shaochun city to the Ding capital was long and trekking for thousands of li. Thus it would take half a year to go back and forth. Shen Xian left on the 2nd day after receiving the imperial edict. Luo Ling and Luo Ten also accompanied them. Luo Ling was asked to go by Luo Sui. As the eldest grandson of the Luo family, Luo Ling would support the entire Luo family in the future. Luo Sui's intention was to let Luo Ling follow him to the Ding capital to gain experience, and also to understand the current situation of Ming-Chi. Luo Sa had to stay in the Shaochun city to continue training the Luo family's army with the elders. Originally, Luo Tan and Luo Qian were not allowed to tag along. Who knew that Luo Tan would secretly climb onto the carriage and hide in the box at the back of the carriage? Only when they were halfway there did she suddenly pop out. At that time it was too late to chase her away. Thus one could only send a message back and bring Luo Tan along to the Ding capital. Luo Tan was full of yearning for the Ding capital, and repeatedly assured that she would not cause trouble before finally traveling with Shen Miao and entourage. Other than the front of the Shen family's army that he brought back, this time Shen Xian also brought a portion of the Luo family's army. This group of people were personally trained by Shen Xian and Shen Qiu, and were the most elite people. If any of them were placed in other teams, they would be considered as a small leader. This group was trained by Shen Xian himself, and followed him in the name of bodyguards. From the beginning of spring until late autumn, the green trees along the way had all turned into withered leaves, swaying with the wind and falling into the soil. When the entourage of people started to add clothes, they were just about to reach the Ding capital. The sky gradually darkened, and the group of them rested in and outside the city. Shen Qiu said, "Tomorrow morning we will enter the city and find a residence to stay in." At the beginning when she left, the Shen family's residence was separated so naturally, it was impossible to return to the Shen residence. Previously at the Luo family, Luo Shuiyan had told Luo Sui about the matter of splitting the family, so Luo Ling and Luo Tan were not surprised. Luo Tan rested her chin on her hand and said with a yearning expression, "Gu gu gu fu, let's find a lively place to stay, okay? I have never been to the Ding capital before. It would be great if I could find a house where it would be lively the moment I step out." Luo Shuiyan smiled and said, "Originally, the eastern part of the city was the most lively, but we haven't been back there for 2 years. I don't know if it has changed." "Isn't that simple?" Luo Tan asked the waiter who was serving the dishes. "This young brother, do you know where is the most bustling place in the Ding capital?" The waiter didn't know the identity of this group of people, but he saw that they had brought so many people with them, and that they were dressed very well. Especially the young lady sitting in the middle. She was young but had an outstanding bearing. With one look, he knew that she was a young lady from a noble family. Immediately she did not dare to neglect and replied enthusiastically, "Young lady, there are many lively places in the Ding capital." The east and south sides of the city were quite lively. There are many shops in the east of the city. It's convenient for a lady to buy some cosmetics. There are many restaurants in the south of the city. If you want to eat, go to the south of the city. Luo Tan was obviously not very satisfied with this answer. She wrinkled her nose and said, "That's it." The waiter was afraid that he would make her unhappy, so he thought for a while and said, "If Miss really wants to have some fun, it's better to go to the south of the city." Recently, the people of Qin and the Great Liang came. The emperor gave them a mansion in Yanqing Lane in the south of the city to live. Yanqing Alley is in the south of the city. "What is Yanqing Alley?" Luo Tan asked. Yanqing Alley is the most expensive piece of land in the Ding capital. Shen Qiu explained. It is a good place that even the relatives of the imperial family would not be able to live in. Even the few imperial highness princes did not live in that area when they left the palace. Only the imperial brother-in-law stayed in Yanqing Alley for a period of time. Luo Tan was first surprised. This Yanqing Alley is actually so expensive. Then she was somewhat disappointed. But since it is so expensive, we would not be able to afford the residence there. Chapter 446. When the waiter heard this, he was startled and carefully looked at Luo Tan. Yanqing Alley was a place where one could afford to stay for a few days, let alone buy a house. Seeing Luo Tan's arrogant tone, the waiter almost suspected that he had misjudged her. This person was just a country bumpkin who entered the city for the first time. It does not matter. Shen Miao opened her mouth. There is a street next to the Yanqing Lane, and it is adjacent to the restaurant. It is just outside the lane, and the price is not that expensive. One can always afford it. It's not far from Yanqing Alley, so it's not bad to take a step back. Hearing this, the waiter was taken aback. He subconsciously said, "This young lady is right. That is indeed the case." Jiao Jiao also want to watch the excitement? Shen Xian asked. Naturally Shen Miao did not have the temperament to join in on the fun, and today when she said it like this, it seemed that she had some interest. Feel that it is somewhat fresh. Shen Miao smiled. Good. Luo Tan's eyes lit up as she looked at Shen Miao. Biao youngest sister, you are the best. She thought that Shen Miao deliberately said that for her, and was extremely grateful to Shen Miao. Shen Miao looked up at the waiter. Have the people from the Qin country and the Liang dynasty arrived? The waiter's gaze had never left the youngest girl from the beginning. He felt that when she sat there, even the chair seemed to become golden and dazzling. Hearing Shen Miao's question, he immediately replied respectfully, yes. Ming Qi's tribute will be held a few days later, and the Qing country and the Great Liang have sent people over to congratulate. Currently these people are arranged to stay in the residence in Yanqing Lane. Who did the Qing country and Great Liang send over? Shen Miao asked. The waiter scratched his head. In the Qing country it is His Highness the Crown Prince and Princess Ming'an, and in the Great Liang it is His Highness Prince Rui, the younger brother of Emperor Yongle. Shen Miao's eyes hung down. Many thanks. After the waiter left, Luo Ling asked, what does Biao's younger sister think about the people from the Qing country and the Great Liang? Shen Miao smiled. Nothing much. Just feel that it is somewhat strange. Luo Tan smiled. No matter what, when we reach the Ding capital tomorrow, we will be able to watch the excitement. In the palace of the Ding capital, in the emperor's bedroom, the thick smell of medicine filled the entire bedroom, and the incense in the incense burner made one's heart feel melancholy. On the dragon bed, Emperor Wen Hui's eyes were half closed as he leaned on the couch, and the palace beauty beside him was gently feeding him spoonfuls of medicine. This person was none other than Consort Dong. She fed him very patiently and carefully as Emperor Wen Hui could only eat a small spoonful at a time. She blew on the spoonfuls until it was cold and tested that it was not hot before slowly feeding it to Emperor Wen Hui's mouth. While she was feeding, she gently patted Emperor Wen Hui's back to make his breathing smoother. When Emperor condominium, and also after Emperor He, after of it, when Hui's Tsong Ji He Shun Li said. Emperor Wen Hui frowned and swallowed the last trace of bitterness in his mouth before saying, it is hard for you to remember this. Your Majesty is not afraid of bitterness, but this consort is afraid that your Majesty is afraid of bitterness. Consort Dong Shu smiled gently. Your Majesty, on account of this consort's face, eat a little of this fruit. Emperor Wen Hui was tickled by her and his eyes softened. In this palace, you are the one who understands Zhen's intention the most. There were many things that could change in 2 years' time. No matter how vigorous Emperor Wen Hui was, he would not be able to resist the erosion of time. Moreover, he had so many sons who were younger and stronger than him, and had bigger ambitions. The internal and external situation was critical, and he had aged a lot, and his body had gradually become sickly. The Crown Prince's illness was also in a precarious situation, and the Crown Prince's faction was gradually losing. Prince Zhou and Prince Jing were aggressive and Prince Xian and Prince Li were eyeing covetously. Even Emperor Wen Hui was tired of looking at the women in the inner palace. At this time, Consort Dong Shu and Prince Ding, Fu Xiuyi, who were aloof from worldly affairs, entered his eyes. Chapter 447. The most reassuring thing for an emperor was a son and a woman without ambition. When Emperor Wen Hui was sick, he loved to summon Consort Dong Shu to serve him. Under such imperial favor, Consort Dong Shu was as cautious as usual, and would not take the initiative to talk to Emperor Wen Hui about Prince Ding's matter, which made Emperor Wen Hui even more satisfied. Occasionally he would talk with Consort Dong Shu about some unhappy matters in court. The tribute is about to begin. Emperor Wen Hui sighed. The messenger said that Shen Xian will return to the capital in these few days. I banished him 2 years ago, and I'm afraid he still has resentment in his heart. If it weren't for the urgency of the situation, I wouldn't have invited a wolf into my house. Your Majesty, Consort Dong Shu said with a smile. General Shun is your official and naturally needs to do things for you. He will do whatever you want him to do. So why does your Majesty torment yourself? Minister, Emperor Wen Hui sneered. This official's prestige is bigger than Zhen's. How can Zhen believe that he wants to be an official? It was the same for Xie Ding in the past, but he lost his son. Now that the Xie family is unable to withstand a single blow, we can't be bothered to exterminate them. The Shen family, after the tribute, was still. I can't help feeling uneasy. Consort Dong Shu no longer spoke. At this time, if she were to speak, there would be the possibility of the inner palace interfering in politics. Therefore, he lowered his head and did not say a word. only fiddling with the enamel bowl. In Consort Dong Shu's Shufang Palace, there was a person standing at the moment. That person was wearing a luxurious robe and had a cold elegance. It was Fu Xiuyi. Compared to 2 years ago, he seemed more mature and steady, with an indescribable style. Shen Xian is resting outside the city today, and will enter the capital tomorrow morning. The guard in front of him bowed and said in a low voice to him. Fu Xiuyi gripped the cup in his hand tightly, and one did not know what he was thinking about. After a moment he suddenly smiled. Gentleman Pei's divine foresight is indeed correct. Tomorrow at the capital, he said, pass down the order. All the guards at the city gates listen up. When Shen Xian returns to the capital, the entire city must welcome him. The guard cupped his hands in acknowledgement and hurriedly retreated. Fu Xiuyi stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and a trace of seriousness flashed across his face. 2 years ago, the Shen family took drastic measures and messed up all his plans. Now returning to the Ding capital, Fu Xiuyi had a feeling that this was a chess piece of the Shen family's plan. Perhaps Shen Xian had long known that there would be a day when he would return to the capital. So he was so decisive when he left. Since it's like this, then how about roasting the Shen family on top of the scarlet flames once more? Let the Shen family be a target, and let Emperor Wenhui, Prince Zhou's faction, Prince Li's faction, and even the Qing country, and the Great Liang keep their eyes on Shen Xian, this fat piece of meat. He was a vengeful person after all, and he hated being toyed with by others even more. Daring to scheme against him, Fu Xiuyi, the Shen family must pay the price. On the morning of the second day, Shen Xian's group set off once again. If one were to start their journey from this inn, they would be able to reach the Ding capital before noon. Since he still needed to find a house, it was best to do it as soon as possible. When they reached the Ding capital's city gates, the guards at the city gates saw Shen Xian's waist token and were immediately in awe. So it is General Shen. As they spoke, they quickly opened the city gates and welcomed Shen Xian and entourage in. Luotan said, Uncle, they seem to respect you very much. It seems that Uncle's official position is very high. Shen Xiu and Shen Miao frowned at the same time. That day when they left the Ding capital, those guards looked at their faces coldly and could not wait to hit them when they were down. Now with such enthusiasm, it was definitely not only because they needed him to come back to deter those people in the Qing country. Most likely it was because of someone's guidance. Luo Tan lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked out before exclaiming, This is the Ding capital. It is so big and lively, and there are more people than the Shaochun city. Ah, Biao youngest sister, the young ladies here are really good looking. How can they be so fresh and lively? Heavens, even the gentlemen are all fair and tender. Chapter 448. She was so noisy that people nearby heard her, and turned their heads to look in her direction. It was not a big deal if one did not look, but when one saw, one exclaimed, It's General Shen. General Shen has returned. General Shen is back. Shen Xian already had an illustrious reputation in the hearts of the common people of Mingqi, and with the Xie family's mishap in these 2 years, the Shen family also moved away. It really made one feel a hero's end of the road. Even when the Qing country and the Great Liang's people came to the Ding capital, they would suddenly have a feeling of being unable to protect themselves. And the appearance of Shen Xian at this time undoubtedly gave the commoners a pillar of support. Immediately more and more people gathered around and exclaimed, General Shen has returned. For a moment, the cheers of the crowd almost blocked the entire path of the carriage. The commoners were shouting fanatically, and their faces were full of admiration. Luotan covered her mouth. Oh my God, Uncle has such a high reputation in these people's hearts. Luo Ling and the rest who were outside had an embarrassed expression. It was a good thing to have people lining the streets to welcome him, but it was also not bad to be chased after by others. Every year when Shen Xian returned to the capital in triumph, he would always be like this. But now, Shen Xian did not return with a body full of meritorious service. Instead, he was summoned back by the emperor 2 years after being expelled from the capital. The louder the cheers of the commoners, The louder it was as if it was a slap on Emperor Wenhui's face. If this was not directed at Emperor Wenhui, then what was it? In the carriage, Luo Shuiyan's and Shen Miao's expressions also sank. Especially Shen Miao, her gaze suddenly turned cold. Only Luo Tan did not know what had happened, and was happy for Shen Xian's prestige. The road was blocked to such a state that Shen Xian could only let the guards beside him explain to the commoners. When the commoners heard this, even though they were still standing on both sides of the street, they were not as agitated as before, and also opened up a path. Mo Qing and Ah Qi first rode their horses to look for a residence. Just like what Shen Miao said, there was a street next to Yanqing Lane, in the southern part of the city, and the residence there was not bad. Now that Shen Xian had spent a lot of money on reorganizing the Luo family's army, he was not as well off as before. Even so, when Shen Miao wanted to stay in the residence in the southern part of the city, Shen Xian agreed without a second word. The carriage headed south of the city. The closer they got to Yanqing Alley, the fewer people there were. This was because most of the people living around Yanqing Lane were high-ranking officials and nobles. They were either rich or respectable. Commoners could not afford to live on the land there. The commoners who had come to greet them had also dispersed. The carriage traveled smoothly. Mo Qing and the rest quickly came back to report that they had found a residence to stay in, and would talk about money later. The original owner of the residence was a newcomer under the name of Shen Xian, and did not ask for much money as a mortgage. When they were just a wall away from the Yanqing Alley, a gust of wind suddenly blew, and coincidentally blew open the curtain of the carriage that Shen Miao was sitting in. The curtain flew up and quickly fell back down. Shen Miao's gaze slightly congealed, and when Luo Tan saw it she asked, "What is it?" Shen Miao swept a glance at the curtain of the carriage and shook her head. Nothing. But her heart was secretly alerted as for a moment just now, she felt that she was being spied on. Being the center of attention was extremely uncomfortable. On a tall building in the distance, there was a young male and female, holding a jade flute standing side by side. That female was as beautiful as a flower, and wore a golden dress. She had big eyes and a small mouth, and was covered with pearls and jades. When these tacky jewelry landed on her body, it did not look ugly but made her look delicate and charming. She looked at the distant carriage and said disdainfully, "This is the formidable great General Shen family? Such a great reputation, but it is only so." The man beside her was in his early 20s, and he bore some resemblance to her. He was considered handsome, but because his nose was slightly hooked, his entire person had some hostility that was hard to get along with. He smiled. To be able to make the imperial family of Mingqi afraid, it is not a simple thing. Chapter 449. Crown Prince older brother is joking again. That young female's brows slanted, and she had a very arrogant look. In the beginning the Xie family of the residents of the Marquis of Lin, and was also lawless, and until now they are like stray dogs. That Xie Jingxing did not even leave a complete corpse, so one cannot guarantee that the Shen family will be the second Xie family. The male smiled, and did not continue the female's words. On the other side, someone was leaning on the building, and the lush evergreen trees covered half of his figure, only revealing a corner of his golden robe. One hand was holding the teacup in front of him, and that hand was handsome and strong. There was a white jade ring on the middle finger, making the entire hand look like it was carved out of jade. Holding the teacup close to his mouth, one could see the beautiful chin. His thin lips were slightly red, and because of the tea, it was somewhat moist, but it was even more captivating. The corners of his lips slowly curled up. The residence that Mo Qing found was a street away from the Yanqing Lane, and after a turn, it was the busiest restaurant in the southern part of the city. There were endless shops, and the location was very good. That owner was also very easy to talk to, and Luo Shuiyan and Shen Xian were straightforward people. The price that the owner offered was also fair, and they bought the land deeds that night, and the residence changed owners. In the end this end had just settled down when there was an imperial edict from the palace for Shen Xian to enter the palace to meet the emperor the next day. For Emperor Wenhui to be so impatient, It was obvious that the situation had reached a critical point. After receiving the imperial edict, they were busy moving the things, and it was already late. After dinner, they could finally settle down after such a long journey, and everyone went to rest. Shen Miao and Luo Tan stayed in the adjacent courtyard. The residence here was not as spacious as the general residence, but it was considered clean and tidy, with a unique design. It was just that Shen Xian and Shen Qiu were somewhat regretful that they could not train the soldiers in the courtyard. Luo Shuiyan and Luo Tan were extremely satisfied. Shen Miao did not care about these and naturally had no objections. In the end at night, Luo Tan slipped into Shen Miao's room to talk. Luo Tan wrapped herself in a cloak and sat on Shen Miao's couch. "Biao, youngest sister, I cannot sleep. Accompany me to talk." "What do you want to say?" Shen Miao let Jingzhe and the rest withdraw and cut the wick of the oil lamp. At this moment she was not in the mood to sleep, and casually found a book to flip through on the table, but she did not read it seriously. One did not think that the Ding capital would be like this. One could not tell if Luo Tan's tone was lost or happy. "I grew up in the Shaochun city, and thought that the outside was the same as the Shaochun city." One did not expect that the Ding capital was bigger and livelier than what the storytellers said. "Biaomei, I am still a little afraid." The eldest young lady of the Luo family, who was out of control of the law and natural morality, would actually have a day of fear. Shen Miao smiled gently. "What is there to be afraid of? Of course I'm scared when I'm alone, even though older brother Ling was also here. But this was after all not the familiar Shaochun city." "Biao, youngest sister, have you ever been this afraid? At that time Gugu and Gufu were in the northwest region, and left you alone in the Ding capital. Were you not afraid?" "There's nothing to be afraid of," Shen Miao replied indifferently. It was not scary for her to stay in the Shen residence, because in her eyes, the people in the Shen residence were all trustworthy relatives. One did not know why there was no fear, but like what Luo Tan said, she was afraid of being alone outside. Wasn't it the same when she was in the Qing country? Thinking of the Qing country, Shen Miao's eyes flashed and suddenly thought of what the waiter said today. The people from the Qing country and the Great Liang had arrived. At this time in her previous life, she met the crown prince of the Qing country and the Great Liang's people when they were paying tribute. At that time, the Great Liang already had stupid ambitions, and the imperial family of the Mingqi had always been fearful. In order to keep the Great Liang in check, the Mingqi and the Qing country had been probing each other until Fu Xiuyi ascended to the throne, and the Qing country and Mingqi formed an alliance, letting her, the Empress, go to the Qing country as a hostage. And the crown prince of the Qing country, Huang Fuhao, was a very vicious person, and one did not know why, but he always liked to go against her, and Princess Ming'an was so arrogant that it made one feel afraid. Her difficult and humiliating days in the Qing country were mostly because of these two siblings. Chapter 450. As for Prince Rui of the Great Liang, Shen Miao frowned. At the beginning when Mingqi was paying tribute, the envoy that the Great Liang sent over was not this Prince Rui. Instead, it was another relative of the royal family. This Prince Rui's reputation had already spread far and wide. He was the younger brother of Emperor Yongle, but he rarely appeared in the royal family, and the outside world knew nothing about him. Shen Miao was the Empress of Mingqi in her past life, and knew very little about this His Highness Prince Rui, thus Fu Xiuyi did not mention much about this person. In the end, some things had changed. Luo Tan did not notice that Shen Miao was in a daze and continued talking. "Originally I was thinking that if I were to make a trip to the Ding capital in my lifetime, I must pay a visit to the little Marquis of the Xie family of the residence of the Marquis of Linan in Mingqi, but did not think that now that I am here, I would not be able to see him anymore." At this point, there was a hint of sadness in his voice. "Why didn't you wait for me to come and see me?" Shen Miao was slightly surprised for a moment, and the figure that she rarely thought of in the past 2 years gradually became clear in her mind. Fang Yuan returned to the Ding capital and found a servant from the original residence to talk about what happened 2 years ago. The residence of the Marquis of Lin, and was one of the major events. Ever since Xie Jingxing's death, The Xie family army's vitality was greatly damaged, and Xieding aged by 10 years in one night. Xieding originally requested Emperor Wenhui to resign, but Emperor Wenhui did not allow it. Although Xieding still maintained his official position, he did not have any fighting spirit at all. He spent his days muddling along aimlessly. It was his two Shu sons who had entered officialdom. Even though they did not hold a high position in the court, they had a good reputation. It was assumed that after a few more years, they would be able to become outstanding figures in the younger generation of Mingqi. It was when the news of Xie Jingxing's death reached the Ding capital. Princess Rong Xian went to the residence of the Marquis of Lin, and to create a ruckus. He scolded Xie Ding for being heartless, for a marquis residence to lose Princess Yu Qing and Xie Jingxing without rhyme or reason. It was really a man-eating devil's den. Princess Rong Xian was crying and angry at the same time, and almost smashed the residence of the Marquis of Lin uncleanly. After that he became more and more reclusive and rarely came out. The Su family, who had a good relationship with the residents of the Marquis of Lin, and had also declined in these 2 years. Not to mention Su Yu. Even the son of the family who had a bright future had gradually quietened down. In summary, the decline of the Xie family was due to the fall of Xie Jingxing, and the commoners were filled with regret when they mentioned it. A romantic youth, untamed and heroic. He was originally heroic and vigorous on the battlefield, but in the end, he died a tragic death. It was no wonder that when the young ladies of Mingqi heard of Xie Jingxing's death, they cried uncontrollably. Shen Miao looked at the dancing flame, and closed her eyes. In a blink of an eye, she saw that Luo Tan had fallen onto the couch, and was sound asleep. Luo Shuiyin combed her long hair with a comb. Although she was already a mother of 2 children, her hair was still black and shiny. There was not a single strand of white hair on her head. Shen Xian took off his heavy armor, and heard Luo Shuiyin say, "Entering the palace tomorrow, my heart will always feel heavy. What are you afraid of?" Shen Xian walked behind her and pressed on her shoulders, comforting her. "It is not our first time entering the palace. Could it be that you are afraid of music? Don't be afraid, I'm here." "I'm not afraid of that." Luo Shuiyin rolled her eyes at him. "You and I both know that we came back this time. One fear that person in the palace would have a knot in his heart. Originally I had talked about this matter with Father, and Father said that he was afraid that His Majesty would use something to tie down our Shen family." Shen Xian frowned. "What does foreign's words mean?" "Jiao Jiao and Qiu'er are not married yet," Luo Shuiyin reminded. "If it was in the Shaochun city for these 2 years, it would be alright if both of them got married, and at least one worry would be settled. But one did not expect that His Majesty's imperial edict would come so quickly. Now that our Shen family has regained power, one fear that many people in the capital are watching closely. Would His Majesty, in order to tie down the Shen family, make an issue out of Qiu'er and Jiao Jiao's marriage?" Shen Xian jumped in shock. "How can this be? Nonsense." No matter what, Shen Xian's eyes would not allow political selfishness to be involved in Shen Qiu and Shen Miao's marriage. Not to mention using their marriage to place the Shen family in other forces. "Forget about Qiu'er, but I feel that Jiao Jiao cannot wait," Luo Shuiyin said. "Jiao Jiao is now 16. Not to mention in the Shaochun city, in our Ding capital, this age has reached the age to talk about marriage. After 2 years, when one reaches 18, one would be suitable to marry. One must settle Jiao Jiao, while there is no news from the palace." "So urgent?" Shen Xian hesitated. "How would there be any good families around? Moreover, one must understand the other party's character." "What do you think?" Luo Shuiyin looked at him. "What about Linger?" Chapter 451. Early in the morning the next day, Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyin followed Shen Qiu into the palace. They only returned in the afternoon, and Emperor, when Hui restored their official positions, and returned the tiger talisman back to Shen Xian. Those Shen family's army that were in the imperial army were once again returned to Shen Xian's hands, but Shen Xian was not very happy. Pain was the thing that could hone one's willpower. In the harsh environment of the Shaochun city, to be able to train the scattered Luo family's army to an outstanding state Shen Xian was even more indifferent than 2 years ago. Towards Emperor Wen Hui's method of giving a carrot after a slap, he did not show much expression. It was not long after Shen Xian and Luo Shuayan entered the palace. The Shen residents actually sent people over to Shen Miao's place and invited Shen Miao back to sit. Shen Miao was too lazy to care about those people and directly let the servants treat them as if they were not present. The people from the Shen family, who came to inform, waited for a long time and did not believe it. They first begged at the door and said that it was all a misunderstanding at the beginning, and later scolded Shen Xian and wife for being heartless and unfilial descendants. Luo Ling frowned when he heard it. Luo Tan was an impulsive person and immediately rushed out of the door to scold the Shen family people. Luo Tan grew up quarreling with the young ladies in the Shaochun city, and naturally her words were very crafty. She repeated the words that the Shen family people used to throw stones at them when they were down, and those Shen family people were all red in the face. Finally, they could not stand the pointing of the surrounding commoners, and ran away with their tails between their legs. When Shen Xian and the rest returned, Shen Miao informed them about the matter. Shen Xian was silent for a moment before waving his hands to instruct Mo Qing to arrange more guards at the residence's entrance. It was an iron-blooded look that did not care about sentiments at all. This was exactly to Luo Tan's taste, and made her clap her hands in delight. Luo Shuayan said at the dining table, 3 days later is the tribute day, and we all need to go to the palace. In the afternoon let the tailor come over to cut some new clothes, especially for Tanner and Jiao Jiao. We have not been in the Ding capital for 2 years, and do not know what kind of fabric styles are popular at this time. One must not fall behind. When she finished speaking, she looked at Shen Miao with a satisfied gaze. If one were to say that 2 years ago everyone still called Shen Miao an idiot, now after 2 years, Shen Miao had been reborn. With such elegance, coupled with her temperament, even a princess would be inferior to her by a third. Enter the palace. Luo Tan was a little excited. Won't we be able to see the people in the palace? Can I still see the people of Qin State and Great Liang? I heard that the people of Qin State are all tall and big, and the people of the Great Liang imperial family are all incomparably beautiful. I wonder how many of them we can see this time. Luo Shuayan laughed in spite of herself. Our Ming Qi's people are not bad. If Tanner were to see an admirable gentleman at the tribute banquet, Gumu and Gufu will help you inquire about it. When Luo Tan heard about her marriage, she did not feel embarrassed or shy at all and instead said, I am not in a hurry, but Biao youngest sister must seriously consider it. Biao youngest sister does not fancy those people in the Shaochun city, but there are many noble gentlemen in the Ding capital. If Biao youngest sister fancy anyone, one must think for yourself first. She smiled mischievously at Shen Miao. Shen Miao swept a glance at her and did not speak, but it was Luo Ling who was at the side who paused with the chopsticks, and his gaze was somewhat hesitant. In the afternoon, there was indeed a tailor who came to make clothes for them. In order to win over Shen Xian, Emperor Wen Hui had rewarded Shen Xian quite a lot when he just returned from the palace. Among them, there were a few bolts of high-quality fabric that could be used to make clothes. Just as it was late autumn, Luo Shuayan let the tailor measure and made a few pieces for each of the 2 young ladies. Even winter clothes were made. She also picked a lot of jewelry and let others send it over to dress the 2 young ladies up beautifully. Actually, it was not Luo Shuayan's intention to do this, as the tribute was a big matter. Ming Qi must show the richest side of the Qin country and the Great Liang. The civil and military officials would bring their wives and children, and everyone must dress luxuriously and not lose Ming Qi's face. Otherwise they would be the sinner of the world. Shen Miao also looked towards Fu Xiuyi's direction, but the place where her eyes landed was behind Fu Xiuyi, was the green-robed man among the court officials. That person's temperament was aloof and out of the world, and among the court officials, there was a sense of awkwardness that was out of place. He did not look like an official, but more like a scholar. It was Pei Lang. The place where Pei Lang was standing was not far behind Fu Xiuyi. In such an occasion, with Fu Xiuyi's cautious attitude, it was obvious that he was relying on and trusting Pei Lang. Thus he gave Pei Lang such a big face. As if he was aware of the gaze, Fu Xiuyi suddenly turned his head over. Shen Miao's eyes moved, and did not stop for even a moment. Fu Xiuyi looked at the crowd for a moment before turning his head over. Chapter 453. And at the front of the guests, there was a male and female sitting, and both of them were very young. It was already late autumn, and the weather was actually somewhat cold. Even those daughters of officials who were gorgeously dressed would wear a cloak to prevent themselves from catching a cold. This young female was wearing a thin golden muslin long dress, and there were complicated patterns embroidered on it. With this kind of needlework, it would take at least a year and a half to complete. This young female's eyebrows were exquisite, but her actions were not very respectful. Even when the ceremonial officer started to recite the congratulatory words, she swept her eyes across everyone with disdain, and there was not a trace of respect in her expression. This young female was Princess Ming, and beside Princess Ming, and was the crown prince of the Qin country, Huang Fuhao. Huang Fuhao was better than Princess Ming'an. At least he was not as obvious as Princess Ming'an's unbridled performance. He was still smiling as he watched the proceedings on stage, as if he was genuinely proud of the Ming Qi's tribute. It was just that under such a smiling tiger, it made one's heart turn cold. It was Luo Tan's first time coming to such an occasion, and she felt that it was a novelty, and naturally noticed the people at the VIP seats. She thought about it and pulled the sleeves of an official's daughter beside her. And when no one was paying attention, she asked softly, "Why is there only the crown prince and princess of the Qin country? Where is His Highness Prince Rui of the Great Liang?" That young lady was caught off guard by Luo Tan, and almost jumped in shock. Even though she was somewhat displeased, she still answered Luo Tan's doubts with good upbringing. His Highness Prince Rui of the Great Liang is not feeling well, and did not come today. Luo Tan was suddenly enlightened, and looked at Shen Miao at the side. Shen Miao was standing beside her, and naturally the conversation between Luo Tan and that young lady was heard by Shen Miao. Luo Tan said, "This His Highness Prince Rui's airs are really big. Is this not deliberately embarrassing the emperor?" During the Ming Qi's tribute ceremony, the Qin country and the Great Liang's people came to congratulate, but at the end Prince Rui was absent during the ceremony. Was this not a slap to the imperial family of the Ming Qi in front of everyone? Unfortunately, the imperial family of the Ming Qi dared not get angry, and not only that, they had to eat and drink well. There was no reason why, in this world, the strong were respected, and the Ming Qi would not dare to go against the Great Liang. The tribute ceremony lasted for 6 hours, starting from noon, when the sun was at its strongest, and only ended when it was almost evening. All the civil and military officials and their families could not leave. This was a long period of suffering. It was the same for the emperor and empress. The higher one's status was, the more attention they would receive, and the more they could not show fatigue. Even if Luo Tan was a military family's young lady, she would feel that she was lacking in strength even if she had martial arts skills. When she turned her head, she saw Shen Miao standing upright with both hands crossed in front of her, looking dignified and dignified. Luo Tan could not help but be slightly startled. She quietly asked, "Biao, youngest sister, are you not tired?" Shen Miao said, "Not tired." Luo Tan was amazed. The surrounding females were all in the dark using their wide sleeves or skirts to relax. Thus it was rare to see someone as honest as Shen Miao. Luo Tan originally wanted to persuade Shen Miao to secretly relax a little, but looking at her actions, she was unable to say it out. Luo Tan had always known that Shen Miao's bearing was hard to come by. It was just that she was not one to chew on words. Thus she was unable to say what kind of feeling it was, but intuitively felt that Shen Miao looked different from the other young ladies in the Shaochun city. Now at this point, there was an illusion that the dignified bearing between heaven and earth was done by Shen Miao, and that was the correct posture. Even the Empress on the high seat was not as graceful as Shen Miao at this moment. It was already rare for a 16-year-old young female to have such a graceful posture. Not only Luo Tan noticed this, it seemed that some of the noble family's young masters were gradually attracted by Shen Miao. In a group of dispirited noble females, Shen Miao was simply too eye-catching. When Luo Ling saw this, he slightly frowned and quietly moved his body to the side, covering Shen Miao by his side, isolating those slightly presumptuous gazes. Chapter 454. When Luo Shuiyin saw it, she smiled in relief. Shen Miao was completely undecided. Luo Tan winked at Luo Ling, and Luo Ling's cheeks were slightly red as he turned his head away as if nothing had happened. After the 6 hours of offering ceremony was completed, it was time to start the banquet with the Emperor and Empress. Tomorrow's tribute banquet would naturally be a celebration of peace and prosperity, to let the Qing country and the great Liang people see how rich the Ming Qi was. Shen Miao and Luo Tan had just walked a few steps towards the hall of the palace banquet when someone patted her shoulder. Shen Miao turned around and saw a familiar face. "Hey, just now I saw you early in the morning, but we were too far apart and could not come over." "Shen Miao, long time no see." Feng and Ning hugged Shen Miao back and was full of enthusiasm. Compared to 2 years ago, Feng and Ning looked even more beautiful, and the immaturity of a young female was undoubtedly exposed. She had a 100-flower bun and wore a pomegranate red long dress, looking graceful and graceful. She let go of her hands and looked at Shen Miao with dissatisfaction. "Why are you not surprised at all when you see me?" Not waiting for Shen Miao to reply, she continued speaking. "Never mind. You have such a temperament, and I forgive you. But..." She looked up and down at Shen Miao. "Not seeing for 2 years. How did you become so good-looking? Could it be that the Shaochun city's water and soil are so nourishing? Why is it that you look like a different person from before?" Today Shen Miao was also instructed by Luo Shuiyin to dress up properly. She was wearing a purple crescent moon phoenix tail dress, and the outer garment was embroidered with big lilacs. Her hair was combed into a cloud bun, and there was a jade begonia hairpin on it, and her earrings were small pearls. Her facial features were delicate and pretty, but her bearing was breathtaking. As she stood there quietly, there was a gentle and dignified air about her. Her pair of eyes were as clear and black as a newborn deer, causing many young males to frequently turn their heads to look at her. This female's appearance was good, and had an extraordinary bearing, which was the icing on the cake, making it difficult for one to forget. Luo Tan had been standing beside Shen Miao and looking curiously at Feng and Ning. Feng and Ning finally noticed her and asked, "Who is this?" "My Biao older sister Luo Tan." Shen Miao said, "This is Feng, young lady Feng and Ning." Luo Tan greeted Feng and Ning. Feng and Ning had a fiery temperament and Luo Tan was straightforward and lively. Both of them hit it off at first sight and quarreled until Shen Miao's ears hurt. When it was time to take a seat, Feng and Ning greeted Feng foreign and slipped over to Shen Miao's side to sit down, so that it would be more convenient to talk to Shen Miao. Previously, during the ceremony, they had to stand according to their official positions, but now that it was time for the banquet, they could sit as they pleased. Shen Xian had just returned to the Ding capital and did not have any particularly good colleagues, so he casually found a position. But now that he was invited back by Emperor Wenhui, the surrounding colleagues naturally did not dare to neglect him and spoke respectfully. Feng and Ning whispered to Shen Miao's ears, "Tisk these fence-sitters. Initially when General Shun left the city, why did they not welcome him? Now they are doing intimate actions and putting on airs." Shen Miao gently smiled and declined to comment. One heard Feng and Ning speaking again. "Look, your Tangjia also came." Shen Miao was startled for a moment and raised her eyes to look at the direction that Feng and Ning was pointing at, and just happened to meet the other party's gaze. After 2 years, she finally saw Shen Yu again. Ever since Shen Gui's incident, his position in the court had plummeted. He originally relied on all sides to climb up, and after Shen Yuan was beheaded, the courtiers saw him as a plague and could not wait to avoid him. Shen Gui himself did not have any ability and was getting more and more destitute every day, so he did not have the opportunity to come to such an occasion. It was Shen Wan's entire family that came. Most likely Shen Wan's career was going smoothly, as at this moment, he was toasting with people with a face full of smiles. Chen Roqiu was sitting beside him, and talking to her foreign with a smile, looking as satisfied as 2 years ago. But time had passed, and was not as lively as before. Thinking that the second household did not have a son, old Shen Foreign had also put a lot of pressure on the third household, and Chen Roqiu had to bear the pressure of old Shen Foreign to give Shen Wan more branches and leaves. Thus it was not easy for her. Chapter 455. The one who was looking at Shen Miao was Shen Yu. Shen Yu, Yi Pei Lan, Bai Wei and Jiang Shaoxian were sitting together, and their eyes were staring at her. Even though they were far apart, Shen Miao could still taste the resentment in Shen Yu's eyes. Shen Yu was wearing a smoky pink pleated dress, and had her hair combed into a crown. She was now 18 years old, and had a delicate and refined appearance, but her looks were pleasing. But Shen Miao's eyes paused on the bracelet on her wrist, and glanced at the agate silver hairpin on her head before her lips hooked up. With Shen Yu's love of being in the limelight and fear of missing every opportunity to show herself, she was still using jewelry from 2 years ago. This could only mean that the current third household's money was not that loose. Thinking about it, old Shen Foreign was extravagant in spending money, and after separating from the family, there was no Shen Xian's support. Thus Chen Roqiu's family must be very difficult. In addition to Shen Wan's official career, the amount of money that Shen Yu could control would be a lot less. No matter how noble one was from a scholarly family, one still had to live. Without money, how could one be tough? Actually, with Shen Yu's good looks, it was not difficult to marry an official's young master. As such, she could more or less help Shen Wan, but Shen Yu did not talk about marriage until now. In her previous lifetime, Shen Miao did not understand, and even foolishly wanted to find some young talents for her. It was only later that she saw that Shen Yu's heart was big, and how could ordinary young talents enter her eyes? Shen Yu stared straight at Shen Miao, and her heart was filled with boundless jealousy and hatred. She could clearly see that the material of Shen Miao's clothes was only available in the palace. Previously, when Shen Wan did a good job, she was lucky enough to get a bolt of it. She originally wanted to keep it to make clothes, but who knew that Shen Wan gave it to his superior? In the past 2 years, Shen Wan's official position was getting higher and higher, but Shen Yu's money was not as easy as before. Shen Yu attributed all this to Shen Xian, who took away most of the money after the separation, causing her to be in such a tight situation. She originally thought that Shen Miao had rolled to a desolate place like the Shaochun city, and would not have a chance to return in this lifetime. Who knew that not only did Shen Miao return, she also returned in such a glamorous manner. Those gentlemen would frequently look at Shen Miao's side. Shen Yu's heart was filled with unwillingness and jealousy, and could not wait for Shen Miao to die. No matter how sharp her gaze was, Shen Miao only smiled faintly, and turned her head to talk to Luo Tan and Feng and Ning, but did not look at Shen Yu. At this moment, Celestial Empress and Celestial Empress took their seats. The original commotion gradually subsided as Emperor Wenhui smiled, and instructed everyone to be happy with the mountains and rivers, and enjoy themselves to the fullest. Following that, on the VIP seats, the Crown Prince of the Qin, Huang Fuhao and Princess Ming'an also sat down. Princess Ming'an directly ignored the etiquette of the palace, and was very arrogant, and did not even greet Emperor Wenhui. Emperor Wenhui's smile was somewhat stiff, but it was Huang Fuhao who had a very respectful appearance. Luo Tan looked around, and when Feng and Ning saw it, she asked, "What are you looking at?" "I am looking at why that Prince Rui of the Great Liang is not here yet." Luo Tan said, "Is it not said that the people of the Great Liang's imperial family are all incomparably beautiful? And even Emperor Yongle was an outstanding beauty. Since Prince Rui is Emperor Yongli's younger blood brother, naturally he would have boundless elegance. I also want to see this shocking beauty." When Feng and Ning heard it, her lips twitched. "Come on." After that, Prince Rui came to the Great Liang. Other than His Majesty, he had never appeared in front of outsiders. Moreover, even if he appeared today, you would not be able to see his shocking beauty. Why? Luo Tan was puzzled, Is he very ugly? Before the words were finished, one heard a long and sharp shout from the eunuch outside. His Highness Prince Rue of the Great Liang has arrived. Everyone's eyes suddenly looked towards the door. One saw a slender figure walking in from the outside with the guards following behind, and that person walking in front. His figure was extremely tall, and he was wearing a purple robe embroidered with gold threads. As he walked, the purple and gold robe flowed, and there was a faint elegance to it. There was a rhinoceros horn belt around his waist, a white jade pendant and deerskin boots. Even if it was an extremely simple attire, it could be compared to the entire court's civil and military officials. However, the most attractive thing was not these. Chapter 456. His face was half covered with a silver mask. The mask started from the forehead and stopped at the tip of the nose, but because it fitted the facial features, it showed a very smooth line. One could see the high bridge of the nose, and the shape of the pair of eyes was like something in a painting. With a casual sweep, there were thousands of romantic feelings. The chin that was revealed was beautiful, and the lips were thin and rosy. Even if they were tightly closed, it seemed to be a silent invitation. Everyone was silent. This young man was clearly wearing a mask, and one could not see his appearance clearly, but there was a kind of ability to captivate one's soul. Everyone stared at that face without blinking. The silver mask was suffused with a cold light that made one feel a chill. However, that pair of eyes were black and bright, and seemed to contain a playful smile. It was somewhat frivolous and somewhat indifferent, making one unable to differentiate if it was warm or cold. This was a person that was able to attract everyone's attention, a youth that was as bright as the sun. He sat down on the VIP seat, and his every move was elegant and noble. In contrast, Huang Fuhao, who had good etiquette, was actually rude like a boorish person. And Princess Ming, and who was beside Huang Fu, Hao was already somewhat silly looking at him. Emperor Wen Hui laughed out loud and looked at Prince Rue. Is Prince Rue not feeling well today? Why did you come to the tribute banquet and make Zhen and the other ministers surprised? Prince Rue nodded his head at Emperor Wen Hui, and his attitude was somewhat casual and lazy. Suddenly had the mood and came. His voice was very pleasant to listen to, and had a bit of magnetism, that all the seated daughters slightly blushed upon hearing it. But these words were extremely rude and presumptuous. Ming Qi's tribute banquet was a big event, but in Prince Rue's mouth, it was like an ordinary family's banquet, that one could come and go as one wished. It was really somewhat condescending. The Ming Qi's officials dared to be angry, but did not dare to speak. Emperor Wen Hui did not dare to say anything, so what else could they do? This Prince Rue of the Great Liang had the same style of doing things as Emperor Yongle. It was extremely presumptuous, but there was a kind of oppressive pressure. Emperor Wen Hui really did not pursue the matter, and let the officials continue to eat and drink, obviously intending to let the matter pass. Luo Tan was eating the pastries on the banquet as she whispered to Shen Miao. This His Highness Prince Rue is really daring to speak to His Majesty like this. Is he not afraid that His Majesty would punish him? What crime? When Feng and Ning heard it, her lips twitched. One is Prince Rue of the Great Liang dynasty. The Great Liang's people can only be Ming Qi's guests, and whatever the guests do is right. Even though Feng and Ning's voice was very low, she spoke vaguely, and did not dare to speak too clearly since they were in the palace. If it was heard by someone with ill intentions, who knew what the consequences would be. I have never heard of this Prince Rue before. Luo Tan rested her chin on her hand and said, He looks like a handsome man. I really want to see what he looks like under the mask. What Luo Tan liked the most were handsome males, and when she saw this Prince Rue, her eyes were almost glued onto him. Perhaps it is an ugly monster under the mask. Feng and Ning poured cold water on her. Otherwise, why would one wear a mask? I bet he's a rare handsome man in the world. Luo Tan pushed Shen Miao. Otherwise, Biao youngest sister say, What kind of person do you think Prince Rue is? Shen Miao did not even raise her head. Do not know. Say it. Luo Tan was unrelenting. Make a guess, this His Highness Prince Rue who is wearing a mask, or the little Marquis of the Ding capital, who is more beautiful? Shen Miao did not expect that Luo Tan would describe Xie Jingxing as the most beautiful in the Ding capital. She was originally drinking tea, but the mouthful of tea was choked in her throat, and she coughed twice, scaring Luo Tan and Feng and Ning so much that they quickly covered her mouth to avoid being rude. However, her actions were too big, and those who were closer looked over. Shen Miao wiped the corner of her mouth and saw a pair of eyes in a blink of an eye. The man with the mask on the VIP seat tilted his head slightly. One did not know if it was real or an illusion, but his eyes stopped on her for a moment before moving away. His eyes were very playful. Chapter 457. The tribute banquet was naturally filled with wine, and everyone exchanged toasts with one another. And suddenly there was an appearance of prosperity and peace. It was just that at the VIP banquet, Emperor Wenhui and the Crown Prince of the Qin, Huang Fuhao, had some fear in their conversation, and when it fell into the eyes of the observant people, naturally they were well aware of it. In the Qin country, Great Liang and Ming Qi was the weakest, the Qin country was second, and the Great Liang was the strongest. And that Emperor Yongli's valiant style made the Qin country and Ming Qi fearful. Thus they were very respectful towards this Prince Rui from the Great Liang. As for Huang Fuhao, when he was talking to Prince Rui, there were many probing sounds in his words. Most of the female guests had their eyes glued onto this Prince Rui, and every move and action was pleasing to the eye because of this reason. In fact, there was no lack of outstanding looks in the Ming Qi's males, for example Fu Xiuyi, but in front of this Prince Rui, they lacked the unique elegance and nobility, and seemed somewhat clumsy. Even though Luo Tan also loved beauties, she had a quick temper, and very quickly her attention was attracted by the delicacies. She tasted this, tasted that, and was very happy. Because the tribute banquet did not differentiate between males and females, the entire official family sat together. Luo Ling also sat close to Shen Miao, and when he saw that Shen Miao was not eating, he placed a piece of snowflake cake in front of Shen Miao's hands and said warmly, "Biao younger sister should also eat something else, one would not have the strength to return." Shen Qiu originally wanted to give Shen Miao a piece, but Luo Ling had already beaten him to it, and did not know where to place the snowflake cake in his chopsticks. His bowl was already full. Moreover, why would a grown man eat snowflake cake? After thinking about it, he placed it in front of Feng and Ning, who was the closest to Shen Miao. Feng and Ning was overwhelmed by the favor, and after giving her thanks, she did not eat, and just stared blankly at the snowflake cake. But just at this moment, one heard Huang Fuhao suddenly speaking. Ben Gong heard that the formidable great General Shen had returned to the capital a few days ago. Ben Gong had always heard of the formidable great general's name, but do not know if there is the honor to meet him today. When the words were said, the lively banquet suddenly quietened down. The Crown Prince of the Qin wanted to meet Shen Xian? What did that mean? Shen Xian and the Crown Prince of the Qin were not related at all. But now one of them was the great general that Emperor Wenhui had just recalled back to the Ding capital, and the other was the Crown Prince of the Qin country. Thus their identities were very sensitive. Everyone involuntarily looked at Emperor Wenhui's expression. Emperor Wenhui's smile did not change, as if this was a very small request before looking at Shen Xian. Official Shen. Shen Xian quickly stood up and bowed to Huang Fuhao. "This general greets your highness the Crown Prince." Huang Fuhao smiled. "I have long heard that General Shen is brave and invincible, that even the scattered troops at the borders can form a new formation." That day when the Shen family army returned to the capital, the commoners lined the streets and cheered. Ai. He gave a long sigh. If our great Qin also have such a talented general, then we would not have to worry for 100 years. Emperor Wenhui's pupils shrunk unnoticeably, and the expressions of the ministers at the banquet changed as they looked at Shen Xian with complicated gazes. He said that Shen Xian could form a formation even if the army was scattered at the border. On the surface, he was praising Shen Xian's outstanding talent, but he was implicitly mentioning Shen Xian's danger. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. This was a logic that existed since ancient times. And for the commoners to have such a high voice, for a general who was expelled from the capital by the emperor, it meant that in front of the imperial family and Shinexan, the commoners were on Shinexan's side. No imperial family would tolerate a subordinate whose voice was higher than their own. As for the last sentence, it really pushed Shinexan to the teeth of the storm. Huang Fuhao was trying to dig Shinexan over in front of Emperor Wenhui. No matter how the ministers of Mingqi had ulterior motives, in the face of a foreign enemy, they would be united against them. The gaze that they used to look at Shinexan was like looking at a general who had committed treason. Chapter 458. Shen Miao's eyes slightly sunk as she stared coldly at Huang Fuhao. Huang Fuhao was a person who liked to see others in a difficult position, as if the imperial family of the Qing country had the word vicious in their blood. Shen Xian and the Qing country did not have any antagonism, but Huang Fuhao still refused to let them go. Perhaps this was a destined enmity. Before Emperor Wenhui could speak, he heard a chuckle. Everyone looked towards the direction of the voice and saw Prince Rue, who was sitting at the VIP seats, put down the wine cup in his hands and looked at Huang Fuhao. His voice was low and pleasant to listen to, with a kind of lazy drunkenness, almost with a bit of bewitching color. But his words were impolite. He said, "Since Brother Huangfu loves General Shen so much, one can request from His Majesty. His Majesty is generous and would not disagree." It was obviously pushing the boat with the current, but when it fell into everyone's ears, it had 1,000 different meanings. How would Huang Fuhao really want Shen Xian? He was only pushing Shen Xian to the teeth of the wind and waves to see Shen Xian struggling. If Emperor Wenhui really gave Shen Xian to him, the Qing country would have no choice but to provide for Shen Xian due to their face. But who knew if Shen Xian was Emperor Wenhui's spy? The Qing country and Mingqi were still in a mutual probing relationship. So who would place an untrustworthy person under one's eyelids to find trouble for oneself all day long? Emperor Wenhui also thought of this point, and the strange expression gradually dissipated and returned to his previous appearance. He smiled. Talents are cherished by the world. If the crown prince insists on wanting General Shen, then Zhen can only respectfully comply. This time Huang Fuhao was placed in an awkward situation. Just now he had provoked so much, and now he had fallen into a disadvantageous situation. It was impossible to get this person back. But if one were to let it go like this, it would be like losing face. And all this was because of a sentence from Prince Rue. Huang Fuhao looked fiercely at that masked man, as if he wanted to carve that person into his eyes. Princess Mingyan and Huang Fuhao were together, and seeing that Huang Fuhao was in a difficult situation, naturally she wanted to help him out. It was just that firstly Prince Rue had unlimited elegance, and she was not willing to become enemies with him. And secondly, she could not afford to offend the great Liang people. She vented all her anger on the Shen family. Looking at Shen Xian, she suddenly laughed. Her voice was thin and sweet, but because of her current attitude, it seemed a bit sharp. She said, "How would General Shen dare to take back such a great general? With such bravery, Ben Gong and Crown Prince's older brother would have a headache. Why don't we take back the young miss of the Shen family? I heard that the young miss of the Shen family is the apple of General Shen's eye, and is a beauty. I wonder if our great Qin will have this fortune?" Luo Tan and Feng and Ning suddenly grabbed Shen Miao's hands and became vigilant. Luo Ling and Shen Qing's expression slightly changed. Shen Qiu's and Luo Shuiyan's expression sank, and Shen Xian suddenly looked at Princess Mingyan. As for Shen Miao, she lowered her head and looked at the teacup in front of her, as if she did not hear Princess Mingyan's words. She watched as the tea leaves in the teacup swirled around and slowly sank to the bottom of the tea. A general of a country couldn't be easily taken away, but it was easy to take away a minister's daughter. If one wanted to have a good relationship with the Qing country, marrying over a princess or a minister's daughter was a common thing in the past. It was just that no one was willing to marry to a foreign country, not to mention that after marrying over, there would be no father or older brother to help. And even if one were to suffer grievances, one could only swallow it. Shin Xian smiled. My daughter is mischievous and cannot afford the princess love. There was no trace of politeness in his words. Emperor Wen Hui's eyes were deep, but he did not intend to speak out to help. Shin Xian had such a straightforward temperament, and once it was related to Shin Miao, his attitude would be incomparably tough. Chapter 459. When Shin Yu saw the situation, there was a flash of gloating in her eyes. She really wished that she could marry Shin Miao to the Qin country, and it would be best to marry an old man as a concubine, and torture her to death in a foreign country. That Princess Mingyan did not think that Shin Xian would reject her without giving her any face, and there was a look of displeasure on her face. Because when she answered, Shin Xian's matter had already passed, and Huang Fuhao did not have any reason to continue, and was too lazy to speak. He sat at the side leisurely drinking his wine, and coldly looked at Princess Mingyan making things difficult for the Shin family. Princess Mingyan said, "One cannot say it like that. Everyone knows that the young lady of the Shin family's army has both ability and integrity. Why does young lady Shin look down on Ben Gong, and is not willing to greet Ben Gong?" With such a rude hat being put on, Shin Miao could not cover it up even if she wanted to. She simply stood up and bowed to Princess Mingyan. "This official's daughter greets your Princess Highness." She suddenly stood up, and everyone's eyes in the hall landed on Shin Miao. 2 years' time was enough to change a lot of things, including the impression of an idiot female that was deeply engraved in people's hearts. Because it was too far away, it gradually faded. When the young female in front stood up, she was like a different person from the memory. The light purple dress made her skin even more translucent like jade. After staying in a place like the Shaochun city for 2 years, the sandstorms did not even grind her down a bit, but instead the noble air around her became more obvious. Her facial features were as delicate as a painting, which made one's heart feel comfortable, but there was a faint majesty in her gestures. Gentleness and firmness were strangely blended on her, and there was a kind of grace and dignity. Even the Empress by the Emperor's side did not seem to have such a natural bearing. Princess Mingyan's brows wrinkled. She did not expect that Shin Miao would have such good looks and bearing, and she had long known of Shin Miao's name as an idiot. Bringing Shin Miao out was nothing more than to embarrass the Shin family, and did not think that at this moment it would be lifting a rock to smash one's own feet. But the reason why Princess Mingyan was Princess Mingyan was that she had some capital to be arrogant. She immediately raised her eyebrows, and looked at Shin Miao up and down, as if she was sizing up goods, and said, "Young lady Shun has the countenance of a flower and the moon, and is indeed an outstanding beauty. No wonder General Shun wanted to hide young lady like a pearl in his palm. With such good looks, I wonder which family will be fortunate enough to marry young miss into their mansion in the future?" These words were a little overboard, and Shin Xian immediately glared at him. Although he had to take into consideration the other party's identity, he could not tolerate his own daughter being spoken to like this in public. Just as she was about to speak, that Princess Mingyan diverted the topic. "One think that young lady Shun is also talented?" As soon as these words came out, the expressions of everyone in the hall became very interesting. Yi Pei Lan and the rest were trying their best to hold back their laughter. What talent did Shin Miao have? That was something everyone was well aware of. In these 2 years, he went to the Shaochun city again. The Shaochun city was a borderland with many martial artists, and one fear, that they were even more vulgar. Shin Miao's eyes slightly drooped. This official's daughter's talent is shallow, the princess is overpraising. "Miss Shun, you don't have to be modest." Princess Mingyan smiled innocently. Speaking of which, when Ben Gong was still in the Qin country, one had heard that a few years ago young lady Shin obtained first rank in the Ming Qi's academy examinations. When Ben Gong heard it, one was extremely moved. Now seeing young lady Shin again, one recalled this old matter. Shen Miao lowered her head and did not speak. Luo Shuiyan and Shin Qiu however were anxious in their hearts. At this moment, if one still could not see that Princess Mingyan was deliberately finding fault and deliberately targeting Shin Miao, then one would be blind. With that said, everyone recalled the Chrysanthemum Banquet's Academy examinations, where Shen Miao and Kai Lin competed in archery, and the 3 arrows made Kai Lin speechless, and he ended up in a sorry state. It was also at that time that Shen Miao, who was completely different from the past, appeared in front of everyone for the first time. Chapter 460. Coincidentally, Kai Darren and Kai Lin were present at the tribute banquet, and Kai Lin's face immediately turned red. Now that Kai Lin was 2 years older, he had matured a lot as compared to the domineering one. That little grudge with Shen Miao had long been thrown to the back of one's mind with time, and because he was no longer infatuated with Shen Yu, it could be said that the grudge was resolved with a smile. But one did not expect that the old matter would be brought up in front of so many people, making him extremely embarrassed. It was not only Kai Lin who was thinking about the old matter. In the corner of the tribute banquet, the Marquis of Linan, Xie Ding, and his 2 sons were sitting. The current Marquis of Linan was getting older, and no longer had the high and vigorous spirit of the past. Even in such an occasion, he only wanted to find a quiet corner. When the matter of the academy examinations was suddenly mentioned, he remembered that Xie Jingxing was also there, and unexpectedly went up to the stage and defeated Xie Chongwu and Xie Chongchao. At that time, when he returned to the residence, he angrily reprimanded Xie Jingxing, but in his heart, he was proud of Xie Jingxing thinking of the old matters. It was even more difficult to bear. Xie Ding revealed a dejected expression, but it was seen by Xie Chongwu and Xie Chongchao, who were beside him, and a trace of darkness flashed in their eyes. Princess Ming'an continued to speak. Today Ben Gong also have the interest to compete with young lady Shen. Why not compete in archery? Just treat it as a game. These words were said abruptly and strangely. Emperor Wen Hui was the first to laugh. Young lady Shen is a delicate young lady. How could she know such a thing like archery? Your Majesty does not know. Princess Ming'an smiled. At that time, young lady Shen's grace was something that even the great Qin had heard of. It is said that a tiger father does not have a dog daughter. General Shen is so valiant, so young lady Shen must be an extraordinary female. Moreover, young lady Shen is a delicate female. So is Ben Gong not a female? Or is it that your Majesty feels that my great Qin is not worthy to be on par with the Ming Qi? Princess Ming'an looked delicate and beautiful, but her words were very vicious. In one sentence, she brought out the entire Ming Qi. If one did not compete, it meant that the Ming Qi did not look at the great Qin. At this time, how could Emperor Wen Hui let the great Qin and the Ming Qi have a rift? He immediately looked at Shen Miao and said in a seemingly gentle manner, "What does young lady Shen think?" Shen Xian clenched his fists, as he really wanted to help Shen Miao reject this rude request. But if one were to reject it, it would only give Princess Ming'an more justifiable leverage. It was Shen Miao who glanced at Princess Ming'an and lowered her head. This official's daughter dare not disobey the princess' instructions. Did not dare to disobey. At the end, it was still expressing one's unwillingness, as if Princess Ming'an was bullying others. Princess Ming'an also heard the meaning in Shen Miao's words, and her face sank. She then thought of something and giggled. She said, "I heard that during the academy examinations, young lady Shen and that opponent used the method of betting their lives to compete. Today we will also use the method of betting our lives to compete, alright?" No. Shen Xian did not wait for Shen Miao to finish and flatly refused. His face was cold, and he did not care about Emperor Wen Hui's expression as he looked at Princess Ming'an and said word by word, "Since your Princess Highness said it is a game, then just treat it as a game. Why must one implicate one's life? Moreover, the tribute banquet is a joyous occasion. It is better not to see swords and sabers at the banquet." When Luo Shuiyan saw Shen Xian speaking, she could not help but grip the teacup in front of her tightly. At that time, they did not know about the matter of Shen Miao betting her life with Kai Lin during the academy examinations. And when they returned to the capital to know about it, their hearts palpitated endlessly. If they were present, they would definitely not let Shen Miao use her life as a gambling stake. Now that this Princess Ming'an from the Qin country obviously had ill intentions, how would she let Shen Miao take the risk? Who knew that when Shen Xian said this, Huang Fuhao unexpectedly opened his mouth and smiled. Even so, one must treat the game seriously, and that would show the seriousness of the great Qin towards the Ming Qi. General Shen, it is only to let young lady Shen and my younger sister play a game. Could it be that General Shen is afraid? Or is it that the Ming Qi cannot afford to lose? His words were filled with thorns as he looked at Emperor Wen Hui. If the Ming Qi is afraid of losing face, then there is no harm in dampening Ming'an's mood. Chapter 461. Since it had already risen to the face of the country, if Emperor Wen Hui did not make a sound, then he would be humiliated by the great Qin in front of the ministers. In the future, how would he be able to establish his prestige? He did not even look at Shen Xian, and directly said to Shen Miao, "Since Princess Ming'an is interested, Shen Miao, accompany Princess Ming'an to play." With the emperor's golden mouth and jade words, it was useless for Shen Xian to say anything else. Shen Qiu clenched his fists and Luo Tan and Feng and Ning looked at each other uneasily. Shen Miao whispered, "Yes." Her expression was not flustered, but it made everyone slightly startled. Princess Ming'an turned her head to look at Shen Miao, and coincidentally met Shen Miao's gaze. Shen Miao's pair of eyes were extremely clear, like a child's flawless eyes. Originally, with this kind of eyes, one would be able to see through anything with a glance. But it was this pair of eyes that were looking at Princess Ming'an. The gaze was as calm as a pool of water that had settled for 1,000 years, and was not able to stir up any waves. Thus one could not see any trace of emotion. One was unable to see through it. Princess Ming'an could not help but feel irritated. She smiled and let her maids fetch the bow and arrow. She first smiled and stared at Shen Miao. This is a rule that Ben Gong often play in the Great Qin. One person would hold the bow and arrow while blindfolded, and designate the other person to place the fruit on their body, and let the other person shoot. She did not let go of Shen Miao's every expression. Does young lady Shen understand? The surrounding people sucked in a breath of cold air. Last time in the academy examinations, Shen Miao and Kai Lin had fruits on their heads, but their eyes were still open. To shoot an arrow while blindfolded, was not one's life being manipulated by others? Just listening to it made one's hair stand. Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan were already unable to restrain their anger. Shen Miao smiled gently, as if she was not frightened by Princess Ming'an's words. Many thanks to the princess for informing. She was this calm, and did not lose the imposing manner of Ming Qi's side. Immediately more than half of the people present could not help but look up to her. Huang Fuhao stared at her, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Luo Tan pulled the corner of Shen Miao's clothes. "Biao, youngest sister, why don't I go on your behalf? I've practiced martial arts before, so I know a thing or two about it. If it really doesn't work, I'll just avoid it." Shen Miao shook her head and looked at Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan, who still wanted to stop her, and said softly, "No need to worry. Since she said it like that, then she has confidence that she would not hit me. If they hit me, they would be in trouble. Huang Fuhao and Ming'an are both smart people, and won't do stupid things. They are only doing this to scare me and embarrass me." "But sister," Shen Qiu held her shoulders worriedly, "you'll be afraid if you're alone. Regardless of whether she can hit you or not, how can she let you go alone?" "I'm not afraid," Shen Miao replied in a warm voice. "Moreover, if she hurt me, I also have a chance, so why would I let her off?" When she said this, the corners of her lips curled up slightly. It was clearly a smile, but it made people feel a clear chill. Luo Ling patted Shen Miao's shoulder and said softly, "Be careful." Shen Miao nodded her head, and directly walked towards the main hall. She and Princess Ming'an actually walked towards the main hall together, but one would not know if one did not compare. When the two of them walked at the same time, it made others have a strange illusion. Princess Ming'an was a real golden branch in jade leaves, and was brought up by the imperial family. Her appearance was delicate and beautiful, and should be noble and respected, but when she walked beside Shen Miao's hands were crossed and her back was straight. She did not look left or right as she walked, and looked straight ahead. Her dignified and graceful bearing actually crushed Princess Mingyan to the point that she was worthless. There were sounds of hissing in the hall. Huang Fuhao's expression also gradually became ugly. Chapter 462. In all fairness, it was not that Princess Mingyan was indescribable, but Shen Miao's magnanimity and composure would make the people around her feel dejected. But thinking about it, it was unimaginable. It was clear that Shen Miao was a young lady of an official, and Princess Mingyan grew up in the palace. So how could she not be compared to Shen Miao? Naturally, they did not know that Shen Miao had been an empress in the inner palace for many years, and she was extremely demanding of herself to be perfect because of Fu Xiuyi, and those rough experiences in the Qin country made her have a bearing that was indifferent to favor or disgrace. In the previous life, if it was not for Mei Foran's secret struggle and Fu Xiuyi's connivance, she could actually be a good empress who was the mother of the world. It was just that this perfect dream was ultimately shattered alive, but it allowed her to have an unconcealable brilliance in this life. Princess Mingyan did not notice everyone's expression, and only looked at Shen Miao with that shiny black longbow in her hands. This bow was most likely made of good wood, and was soaked in special medicinal herbs, making it look extremely hard and cumbersome. Princess Mingyan said to Shen Miao, "This is Ben Gong's bow. Let's take one arrow each, shall we? Ben Gong will first shoot you with the arrow, then it will be your turn to pull the bow." The words set the sequence, and the people of Mingqi revealed an indignant look, as Princess Mingyan was obviously bullying others. But Shen Miao only lightly complied, and her expression did not waver. The more she showed that she did not care, the more flustered Princess Mingyan's heart was. She swept a glance at the VIP seating, and suddenly her eyes brightened as she sweetly said, "But now that we are competing here, one fear that some people would feel that it is unfair. It is better to let His Highness Prince Rui of the Great Liang be the judge, and stand here to inspect the bow and arrows, to show that we did not falsify." Finishing, her eyes looked affectionately at Prince Rui. The young ladies of Mingqi, who were seated, started to scold this Princess Mingyan in their hearts for not knowing shame. This was clearly an opportunity to get close to Prince Rui, and one think that she was intoxicated by Prince Rui's beauty, thus she did such a thing. But Prince Rui had always been unbridled in his actions, and this Princess Mingyan's request was inexplicable, so he would not agree to it. Who knew that when Prince Rui heard it, he pondered for a moment before nodding his head. All right. This was out of everyone's expectations. Even Emperor Wenhui and Huang Fuhao took another look at Prince Rui. One saw Prince Rui lazily standing up from his seat. His legs were long, and he took 2 steps to the middle of the hall, and stood beside Shen Miao and Princess Mingyan. Princess Mingyan was overjoyed, and delicately stretched out her hands to place the bow in Prince Rui's hands, and said with a smile, "Then would your Highness Prince Rui check this bow and see if there is any problem?" On the seats of the princes, Prince Zhou sneered and said in a low voice, "This princess of the great Qin Empire is really restless. She's making a scene in front of so many people." His tone was full of disdain. "But Miss Shen is unexpected." Prince Jing looked at Shen Miao, who was standing shoulder to shoulder with Princess Mingyan. To be so calm, even if it is an act, one's courage and insight is outstanding. Speaking of which, Prince Zhou touched his chin. This young lady of the Shen family is becoming more and more tasteful. He looked at Fu Xiuyi, who did not speak a word. "Number 9, do you regret?" Fu Xiuyi lightly said. "Fourth older brother must be joking." Behind Fu Xiuyi, there was a green-clad male who was standing quietly. His gaze went past everyone and landed on the purple-clad young female. Pei Lang looked very calm, as if he was looking at a stranger that he had just met for the first time. It was just that the hands in his sleeves were clenched into fists and were slightly trembling. 2 years had passed, and this young female had become more and more attractive. Just like what she said, she was invited back by the heavenly family. But just after returning to the capital, trouble came knocking on her door one after another. The tree longed for peace, but the wind would not cease. Shen Miao did not do anything, but there were people who took the initiative to look for her. Chapter 463. But Pei Lang knew that Xin Miao would not put herself in a difficult situation, because she had a heart that was more ruthless than everyone else. Prince Rui quickly returned the bow to Princess Ming, and Princess Ming shyly and timidly took it and said to Xin Miao, "May young lady Xin stand over there." Also, she picked up an apple from the maid's tray and handed it to Xin Miao with a smile. "Young lady Xin, place it on your head." Shen Xiao, who was seated, suddenly clenched her fists. Yes. Shen Miao's eyes drooped down as she took the apple and walked over to the other side. Everyone looked at her actions, and Princess Ming'an had already ordered people to tie black cloth strips over her eyes. But Prince Rui walked over to Shen Miao's side. Under everyone's eyes, he took the apple from Shen Miao's hands. Shen Miao was startled for a moment as Prince Rui took that apple and gently placed it on her head. Shen Miao looked up at him. Because there was something on her head, Shen Miao was afraid that the apple would fall if she moved too much. Thus she could only look at him motionlessly. The young man was extremely tall, and even if Shen Miao had grown a few centimeters in these 2 years, she would only reach his chest. She could see the golden buttons on his shirt, and she could also see the meaningful look in his eyes. The silver mask revealed this man's good-looking chin and red lips. The corners of his lips were slightly hooked, making one think if there was such a smiling face under the mask. His black eyes were like the stars in autumn water. When he looked over, it seemed to be gentle, but also seemed to be ridiculing. Ridiculing? He placed the apple on Shen Miao's head and bent a finger to rub Shen Miao's hair, as if he was stroking a small beast in captivity. But it was only for a short moment before he took it back, because he was blocking with his body sideways. When others looked at it from this angle, they would only feel that this Prince Rui of the Great Liang was placing the apple for Xin Miao, and did not have any other actions. He turned and walked to the side, as if he was watching a good show with his arms crossed. Xin Miao's attention was attracted by Princess Ming'an in front of her. Princess Ming'an was slowly pulling the bow. That bow seemed to be very cumbersome, and Princess Ming'an was also pulling it strenuously. The harder she pulled, the more the bow was pulled, and the heavier everyone's heart became. Especially Shin Xian's family. Their faces were as heavy as water. The more the bow was pulled, the greater Princess Ming'an's strength would be, and the greater the strength of the arrow, the more dangerous it would be for Xin Miao. One feared that the residual force of the arrow would bring Xin Miao down. And in this competition, how is it like what Princess Ming'an said? It was only a game, but this was a big matter that concerned the face of a country. Losing was a loss of face, but showing fear was also a loss of face. Shen Miao and Princess Ming'an. Everyone was actually optimistic about Princess Ming'an, and only hoped that Shen Miao would not lose too badly. Shen Miao quietly looked at Princess Ming'an, whose eyes were tied with a black cloth. One did not know if Princess Ming and was deliberately torturing Shen Miao, as she pulled the bow slower and slower, and the sound of the bow being pulled tore the hearts of everyone present. Shen Miao's eyes were in a trance, as if she was not at the tribute banquet, but in a foreign country, the Qin country. The princes and princesses of the Qin kingdom, as well as the ladies of the officials' families, surround her in the middle, as if they are watching a joke. And she was wearing clothes that had been mended countless of times, and there was a fruit on her head, as she looked at the person opposite anxiously. That person opposite was arrogant and despotic, dressed in gorgeous and exquisite clothes, and had a white cloth tied over her eyes. She arrogantly said to the crowd of males and females around her, "Look, today let the Empress of Ming Qi put an apple on Bengong's head. Later all of you watch clearly for Bengong. See if this Empress of Ming Qi, who was born in a military family, would be so scared that she peed in her pants? Ha ha ha, you must see clearly and tell Bengong." She arrogantly pulled the bowstring, and the arrow shot over with a xiao sound. It just happened to miss by a little, but it went from top to bottom, piercing through her hair bun, and piercing through her lapel. She screamed in panic and wrapped her clothes tightly, but when she covered it, She heard the ridiculing laughter from all directions getting louder. Such a humiliating memory, but it overlapped with what was in front of her. Shen Miao's lips slowly hooked up, but one did not know if it was out of bitterness or hatred. Her clear eyes seemed to have a layer of black fog that slowly spread to the bottom of her eyes, making it unfathomable. Prince Rui, who was at the side, quietly bent his fingers, paused for a moment, and then quietly released it. She slightly tilted her head in an action that was almost invisible to everyone. Chapter 464. When the arrow shot through the air, everyone present held their breath and focused their attention. There were even some timid females who directly covered their eyes, not daring to look at this scene. The ministers were clear in their hearts that no matter how arrogant and vicious the princess of the great Qin country was, it was impossible for her to shoot a general's daughter in Ming-Chi's territory in front of so many people. But it was one thing to be clear in one's heart, and another to see with one's eyes. They as bystanders felt their hearts beating fast. So what about Shen Miao? Shen Miao quietly watched, and did not even close her eyes, but seriously stared at the arrow that was heading towards her, as if she wanted to see the arrow clearly. But in everyone's eyes, it was her calm and steady demeanor. The arrow made a xiao sound, but it was light and skillful. Just by a little bit, it just brushed past Shen Miao's head. He avoided the bright red apple by a hair's breadth. Shen Xiao, who was seated, suddenly heaved a sigh of relief, and Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan's tightly clenched hands slightly loosened. Feng and Ning and Luo Tan patted their chests, and Luo Ling picked up the teacup in front of him to drink a mouthful, to cover up his worried expression. The entire audience was silent. Huang Fu Hao was originally smiling, but gradually he could not smile anymore. Princess Mingyan waited for a while, and did not hear any cheers or ridicule towards Shen Miao, and there was a bad premonition in her heart. She pulled off the black cloth that was covering her eyes, and saw that the apple on Shen Miao's head was still safe and sound, and her arrow was not far away. And that purple-clad young female, her hair was not messed up, her clothes were still intact, and there was no trace of panic on her face. She only looked at her lightly. "Your Princess Highness, just now it seemed that my hand slipped, and did not shoot." Did not shoot. That sentence was extremely light, but it seemed to contain the most complacent ridicule, making Princess Mingyan's cheeks burn with pain. But after being stunned for a moment, Princess Mingyan reacted. She looked at Shen Miao and said angrily, "You must have moved just now. It was you who moved. Ben Gong would never miss. If you did not move, how would Ben Gong miss?" No one expected that Princess Mingyan would suddenly make things difficult, and even Emperor Wen Hui revealed an unhappy expression. "Is the princess saying that hundreds of people in this banquet are covering up for young Lady Shen?" Shen Miao stood perfectly straight, and from the beginning to the end, she did not even try to evade. Even though one did not know if it was fake or real, but if it was real, this female's courage was enough to make everyone in the world admire her. No matter how much Emperor Wen Hui feared the Shen family was after all Ming-Chi's people. As the Emperor of Ming-Chi, how could he let a Qin country's princess slander Shen Miao in front of him? One feared that today he would indulge Princess Mingyan's nonsense, and tomorrow the emperor's prestige among the officials would plummet. Princess Mingyan felt wronged in her heart, and looked at Huang Fu Hao. Huang Fu Hao looked at her with a gloomy face, and Princess Mingyan quivered. She did not dare to look at Huang Fu Hao again, and turned to look at Prince Rui, who was standing at the side, and said sweetly, "Your Highness." Prince Rui had just seen clearly. Did the young lady of the Shen family hide? When she said those words, Princess Mingyan softened her voice and stared at Prince Rui, which made everyone present feel somewhat ashamed. Prince Rui's lips hooked up. "No." Princess Mingyan was surprised for a moment. "Your Highness, Prince Rui is saying that Shen Miao did not hide. Are you questioning this prince's eyes?" Prince Rui retorted. He looked to be infinitely graceful, and it was enough to make one's heart admire him. But when his voice was cold, it made one feel the chill and dare not look straight at him. Princess Mingyan jumped in shock, but saw Shen Miao standing opposite and looking at her with a smile. "Your Princess Highness," Since one is willing to bet, one must be willing to lose. Or is it that your Princess Highness cannot afford to lose? Chapter 465. You are presumptuous. Princess Ming'an screamed. She suddenly saw the angry gazes that were directed at her from all directions, and suddenly understood that this was Ming Qi's territory. And screaming at Shen Miao had already angered the crowd. She looked at Shen Miao and suddenly sneered. Why would Ben Gong not be able to afford to lose? But do not be too pleased with yourself too early. Ben Gong cannot shoot. Can you shoot? Princess Ming'an's heart was filled with anger. Her archery skills had already reached the point of perfection, and this bow was the biggest bow that she had used since young. Princess Ming'an had played with this kind of blindfolded archery for many years in the Qin country, and had never made a mistake. She originally wanted to give Shen Miao a little trouble, and in order to teach the Shen family a lesson for their rudeness, at the same time as shooting the apple, it would be easy to shoot Shen Miao's clothes to make her lose face. So how could she miss at the crucial moment? But under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Shen Miao did not evade, and this made her not know where the problem was. She proudly proposed a competition, but in the end not only did she not make Shen Miao lose face, she also did not shoot. If those princesses and princes of the Qin country knew about it, they would laugh at her. Thinking of this, Princess Ming'an had some more disgust and resentment towards Shen Miao. Shen Miao looked at Princess Ming'an's actions, and her heart turned slightly cold. In her previous life, she stayed in the Qin country for 5 years, and had dealings with this princess of the Qin country for 5 years. Shen Miao was clearer than anyone else what kind of temperament Princess Ming'an had. Princess Ming'an liked to tease her like this, to play the game of shooting in front of everyone. With one arrow, her hair would be blown apart, and with another arrow, her clothes would be torn apart, and occasionally accidentally, she would even graze her body. When Princess Ming'an pulled the bow, she knew what Princess Ming'an's idea was, which angle the arrow would fly from, and where it would land. After repeating the scene countless of times, how could she not be clear? She simply tilted her head slightly, and let the arrow coincidentally brush past her. No one would believe Princess Ming'an's words, just like how no one believed Shen Miao's words in the beginning. Being wronged, misunderstood, and made a fool of, it should be let this noble princess personally enjoy it. Of course, it was not only this. Shen Miao took the bright red apple and smiled. If it was me, I would ask your Princess Highness to bite this apple in your mouth. At the beginning, the audience was still discussing in a low voice, but when they heard what Shen Miao said, there was a moment of silence. Princess Ming'an's eyes widened and looked at Shen Miao in disbelief. What did you say? Her voice became sharper, and because of the anxiety, it was unpleasant to hear. Shen Miao looked at her with a smile, and there was still a bit of innocence in her eyes. Princess, didn't you say that this is the game of the great Qin dynasty? The archer will choose where to place the apple. Your Royal Highness wanted to put the apple on my head, so I let it go. Now, she smiled generously. If your Royal Highness is afraid, you can change to someone else. It was better if she did not say those words, but when she said those words, Princess Ming'an was so angry that she almost flipped over. If it was another person, would it not mean that she, Princess Ming'an, was timid and could not afford to lose, and would lose all her face in front of the Ming Qi, the great Liang and the Qin country? Yi Peilan sucked in a breath of cold air and said to Shen Yu, is she crazy? How dare she go against Princess Ming'an? Originally in the academy examinations, Shen Miao and Kai Lin confronted each other, because Shen Xian's official position was not lower than Kai Daren's. But now that the other party was a princess of a country, it was really beyond one's expectations that Shen Miao dared to provoke. Kai Lin and Kai Daren looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Initially they thought that Shen Miao was targeting him, but now it seemed that Shen Miao did not even put a country's princess in her eyes. So what else was there to say? Chapter 466. The prince's banquet was also filled with sighs. Prince Li smiled with deep meaning. This young lady of the Shen family is really vengeful. Princess Ming'an stared at Shen Miao, and facing her sharp gaze, Shen Miao only smiled lightly. In helplessness, Princess Ming'an could only look to Huang Fuhao for help. Huang Fuhao lightly coughed, and was somewhat angry that Shen Miao did not know how to appreciate favors. Princess Ming'an also represented the face of the Great Qin, and he could not let Princess Ming'an be dissatisfied. Thus he looked at Emperor Wen Hui and then glanced at Shen Miao. It is only a game. Why is the young lady of Ming Qi so unforgiving? Emperor Wen Hui looked at the Shen family. Shen Exan and Luo Shuiyin were drinking tea by themselves, as if they did not hear the words from above. Shen Xiao and Luo Ling looked up unruffled, but did not express their stance. Feng and Ning and Luo Tan stared at Princess Ming'an with indignation in their eyes. The Shen family's attitude was very clear, and they did not intend to let it go like that. So they were obviously going against Princess Ming'an. Shen Exan also had anger in his stomach. Just now Princess Ming'an was so aggressive that Shen Miao had no way out. And now it was Princess Ming'an's turn to have a taste of this. Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. When Princess Ming'an schemed against others, she should have thought of what it was like to be schemed against herself. Since the Shen family was already placed in the teeth of the wind and waves, and since the Qin country's people were targeting the Shen family, then there was nothing to worry about. When Shen Xian's violent temper came up, he thought that a barefooted person would not be afraid of someone wearing shoes. So even if he shot Princess Ming'an to death today, it would not matter. Emperor Wen Hui looked at Shen Xian's attitude, and his heart understood. Shen Xian was protective of his shortcomings, not to mention that it was related to Shen Miao. Since Shen Xian wanted to be the target, Emperor Wen Hui was happy to see it happen. Moreover, he did not like Princess Ming'an's arrogant and willful temperament that did not put Ming Qi in her eyes, and planned to kill Princess Ming'an's prestige. So he smiled at Huang Fuhao. It is a game between children. Why the crown prince need to be so worried? Since they are playing happily, Zhen will naturally not stop them. Huang Fuhao did not expect that the Shen family was a hard nail, and even more did not expect that Emperor Wen Hui, this old fox, would sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Thus he did not have any other way. Moreover, the ministers of Ming Qi gradually became bolder, and started to whisper. If they were to really reject, then the Qin country's face would really be gone. He gave Princess Ming'an a warning glare. Ming'an, since it is you who suggested it, then play with young lady Shen till the end. He glanced at Shen Miao again and said meaningfully, since Shen young lady is playing, she will definitely not hurt you. The unspoken meaning was that if anything happened to Princess Ming'an, Shen Miao would definitely pay the price. Shen Miao only smiled when she heard such threats. Rest assured, Your Princess Highness. Since we did not sign the life and death agreement, this official's daughter will not hurt Your Princess Highness. The more she said that, the more uneasy Princess Ming'an felt. But now that she was riding a tiger, it was hard to get off, so she could only do as Shen Miao said. Walking to the other side, Princess Ming'an's eyes were like knives that were cutting Shen Miao's body. She suddenly thought of something and her eyes brightened up as she smiled. But young lady Shen, Bengong's bow is not something that anyone can pull. One fear that you, before the words cannot pull it up could be said, one saw that Shen Miao had already pulled the bow easily. It was different from Princess Ming'an's strenuous pulling. Shen Miao's posture was extremely beautiful, and the pull was very relaxed, as if this bow had been with her for decades, and she was very proficient in it. She smiled at Princess Ming'an, and faced Princess Ming'an's incredulous gaze. She lightly said, Good bow. Your Princess Highness bow, I am also very comfortable with it. Many thanks. Chapter 467. She waved her hand, and instructed the maid to tie the black cloth over her eyes. Just as the maid was about to move, she saw Prince Rui picking up the black cloth on the maid's tray, and playing with it. Everyone looked at him strangely. Prince Rui walked to Shen Miao's back, and held her chin with one hand to lift her head up slightly, while the other hand wrapped the black cloth around Shen Miao's eyes. Luo Tan's eyes widened and pulled Feng and Ning. This? What is the meaning of this? Prince Rui's action made Luo Tan curious. Emperor Wen Hui, who was sitting on the high seat, slightly frowned, and Princess Ming'an looked at Shen Miao with jealousy and killing intent in her eyes. Shen Miao was tied up and could not see anything clearly, and could only feel that the person behind her was gentle and gentle. His fingertips were cold, and when it accidentally touched Shen Miao's cheeks, it was like snowflakes kissing the clothes, and there was a faint coolness. But for some reason, the places that were touched started to heat up again. When the people behind no longer moved, Shen Miao then faced the direction of Princess Ming'an and knocked an arrow. Everyone held their breath as they watched her actions with rapt attention, and their hearts were extremely nervous. Some people secretly complained why Shen Miao would do this, to let Princess Ming'an bite the apple in her mouth, and it would be able to humiliate Princess Ming'an. But this also meant that if Shen Miao was not careful, she would injure Princess Ming'an, and even lose her life. The princess of the Qing country lost her life in the Ming Qi, so how would the Qing country leave it at that? Even if Shen Miao sacrificed her life, it would not be enough, and would implicate the entire Ming Qi. If one wanted to let Princess Ming'an be safe and sound, one could only deliberately shoot to the side, and as such, the Ming Qi would lose face. Thinking about it, only if Shen Miao shot the apple in Princess Ming'an's mouth would she be able to win beautifully. However, that was almost impossible. Huang Fuhao stared at Shen Miao. Others were not clear, but Princess Ming'an was his younger sister, so he naturally knew how heavy Princess Ming'an's bow was. Ordinary women wouldn't be able to pull the bow. Even those who were skilled in martial arts and had some foundation in martial arts would have to practice with the bow for a while, not to mention women. Even men would have to practice with the bow for a while. But just now when Shen Miao casually pulled the bow, that kind of skillful posture, skillful gestures, and relaxed expression made people suspect that she had already touched this bow countless times before to be able to use it so smoothly. However, that was simply impossible. It was Princess Ming'an's first time in the Qing country, and it was also Shen Miao's first time touching this bow. Huang Fuhao's heart suddenly had some interest as he looked at Shen Miao, as if he had seen something new, and his gaze became deeper. Shen Miao was completely unaware of it. She closed her eyes and her hands caressed the patterns on the arrows, every tiny scratch on the heavy bow. It was exactly the same as his previous life. She had touched this bow countless of times, and Princess Ming'an would always generously pass the bow to her when she was in a sorry state. "It is your turn." In fact, Shen Miao had secretly practiced countless of times, and she could hit the target, but every time, she would deliberately shoot far away, and be laughed at by the princesses and princes of Ming Qi. Because she was a hostage, she should compromise and live under others' charity, and not be arrogant and despotic. Even if she could win, she must lose, and lose to make Princess Ming'an happy, so that she would have the chance to return alive to see Fu Ming and Wan Yu. Those most difficult years were engraved in her heart, like the simple and unadorned patterns on the bow. His forbearance from his previous life could finally be displayed openly now. She was no longer the Empress of Ming Qi, but could freely and fearlessly attack Princess Ming'an, just like what Princess Ming'an did to her. Chapter 468. She said, "Trouble your Princess Highness not to dodge." Finishing, her hands loosened, and the almost fully drawn bow made a bung sound as the arrow shot towards Princess Ming'an like a meteor. Princess Ming'an was so scared that her eyes blurred. That arrow came too fast and she wanted to dodge, but it was too late. She felt a pain in her mouth as the arrow was right in front of her eyes. She wanted to scream, but with the apple in her mouth, her body softened and she collapsed. The palace maids behind quickly supported her, and Huang Fuhao stood up all of a sudden with a gloomy expression. The hall was filled with sighs, but Shen Miao took off the black cloth that was tied around her eyes, and walked over to the fainted Princess Ming'an, and took out the apple from Princess Ming'an's mouth. On the bright red apple, half of the arrowhead entered, and the remaining half of the arrowhead was outside. It would not pierce Princess Ming'an's throat, but one could see it clearly, All hit. It seems that this official's daughter's luck is very good. As luck would have it, all hit. She smiled. With a hua sound, the hall was suddenly filled with sighs. The officials of Ming Qi were first stunned before their faces flushed with joy, and started to applaud. Someone said, like father like daughter. It was Princess Ming'an who suggested to compete in archery, and Xin Miao had no choice but to accept it. But at the end, Princess Ming'an did not hit but Xin Miao hit, and Princess Ming'an even fainted from fright. Who was strong and who was weak, one would know with one look. Emperor Wenhui had many suspicions towards the Xin family. But now that Xin Miao had helped him gain a lot of face, and made the Qing country suffer, Emperor Wenhui was now very happy. He looked at Shen Xian. General Shen, you have raised a good daughter. Shen Xian cupped his hands, and said that he did not dare. Shen Miao stood in the hall, and there was a slight wind that blew the corner of her skirt up like a blooming flower. She quietly stared at Princess Ming'an, who was being supported by the maids, and restrained all kinds of emotions in her eyes. When she turned her head, she met Prince Rui's gaze. One could not see what kind of expression was under the mask, but this man's gaze was warm and cool, making one somewhat confused. One did not know if he was smiling or not, but he glanced at Xin Miao before walking back to the VIP seats to sit down. Huang Fuhao felt that he had lost face, but he did not know how to redeem it. Today's matter was sudden, and it was caused by Princess Ming'an. But to reach such a stage, Shen Miao was inextricably involved. Looking at Shen Miao, Huang Fuhao snorted coldly. One did not think that young Lady Shen would have such skills. Shen Miao lowered her head and returned to her own seat. She was always so gentle and harmless. She was clearly merciless when she shot the arrows, but now she had a dignified demeanor, as if she was not the one who wielded the saber and spear. She was noble and dignified, even if she wanted to say something out of anger. Under this kind of attitude, it was as if the principles of Buddhism were on her side, making people speechless. Shen Miao, just now you really... Feng and Ning pulled her hands. If you were a male, I would marry you. Revenge with enmity, it is really delightful. Luo Ten also said. Biao youngest sister, I know that you are not one to be bullied. In the Shaochun city, the Luo family had some understanding of Shen Miao's temperament. Weak and easily bullied? Only blind people would think so. Shen Miao's eyes drooped down. Everyone thought that she held a grudge, and because Princess Ming'an pressured her, she repaid it in such a manner. One did not know that her arrow resolved the hatred of the past lifetime. Facing Fu Xiuyi, such a scheming person, naturally one had to plan step by step. As for a person like Princess Ming'an, if she did not return the humiliation she suffered in the past lifetime, she would not be able to live up to her rebirth. Some people needed to endure, and some people who could not bear it would come knocking on the door. She handled things carefully, but on some matters, she still had a consistent temper. With the protection of the family, and the bargaining chip, why would she not dare to go against Princess Ming'an? That would be slapping her face. Chapter 469. Luo Ling handed over a cup of hot tea and asked warmly, Is Biao youngest sister all right? Nothing, she replied with a smile. She was sensitive to feel that there was a clear gaze on her, but when she looked around, no one was looking over, so she thought that it was her misconception. At the seats of the distinguished guests, the youth wearing a mask bent his fingers and flicked the wine cup in front of him. There was a white jade ring on his fingertips that was glowing with a faint jade color. It was a good tribute banquet, but no one expected that there would be such an unforeseen event in the middle. But if one were to investigate the reason, it was Princess Ming'an's own fault. And Shen Xian, who had just returned to the capital to resume his official position, with this unyielding attitude and Shen Miao's beautiful win, once again made a name for himself in the Ming Qi's tribute banquet. No matter what the outcome was, with Shen Xian's high profile, it made others somewhat fearful. At the prince's banquet, Fu Xiuyi's expression had already changed from the initial calm and composed to a calm and collected look, and from time to time he would look at Shen Xian's side. Occasionally he would look past Shin Xian and stop at the purple-clad young female who was sitting quietly. It was not only her. There were a lot of gazes that were sizing up Shin Miao. There were young talents that felt that Shin Miao attracted attention. And naturally there were also Huang Fuhao's gaze that made others feel uncomfortable. At the end, even a careless person like Luo Ten also noticed it and said, "Why is everyone looking at Biao youngest sister? Are people not allowed to eat?" Luo Ling smiled and said to Shin Miao, "Biao youngest sister and I exchanged positions." Luo Ling's position was slightly closer to the inside. And after Shin Miao exchanged positions with him, Luo Ling's tall stature was able to block her, and also block some probing gazes. And for a moment it was much more comfortable. Until the end of the tribute banquet, there were no other matters. Huang Fuhao left halfway, and said that he wanted to see Princess Mingyan, who had fainted from fright. Naturally no one stopped him, but everyone was well aware that after a few days, Princess Mingyan would hate Shin Miao. Even though Shin Miao had Shin Xian's protection, it would be easy for Princess Mingyan to find an excuse to make things difficult for Shin Miao. Everyone's gaze towards Shin Miao unconsciously had a little sympathy. Only Shin Yu and entourage felt pleased when they saw Shin Miao. Most likely Shen Wan wanted to get close to Shin Xian. But now that Shin Xian was reinstated, and was invited back by Emperor Wen Hui, it would not be a good thing for the relationship between the brothers to be too stiff. But this time, Shin Xian had made up his mind. He did not even look sideways when he passed by Shin Wan, and did not have the slightest intention of greeting him. Everyone saw this and understood in their hearts. When Shin Xian was forced to leave the capital, the news of him separating from the Shin family was known by the entire capital. It had always been easy to add flowers to a brocade, but difficult to send charcoal in the snow. Now that Shin Xian had made a comeback, and Shen Wan had come to greet him, any man with guts would not bother about it. In terms of cleaning up, Shin Xian had the upper hand. Shen Wan also did not crazily stick to the cold buttocks. Shin Xian did not pay attention to him, so he did not impatiently go forward. The two brothers were like strangers. After the banquet, some of Shin Xian's former colleagues came over to greet him. Luo Shuiyan brought Shen Miao outside to wait for the carriage to arrive. Luo Tan skipped in front, and Feng and Ning had already gone back with Feng Furen, while Luo Ling and Shin Xiu walked at the back. After turning through a palace door, there was the horse carriage that Shin Xian had arranged. Shin Miao turned her head, and coincidentally saw that at the end of the long corridor in the palace, there was a slender figure slowly walking over. Before one could see the appearance clearly, one could see from afar that the silver mask on his face shone brightly under the light of the lantern. And the embroidered pattern on the corner of the robe was especially clear in the night. One could not see clearly what kind of texture it was, and only felt that it was extraordinarily gorgeous. Shin Miao looked at it carefully. When that youth walked to a distance away from Shin Miao, he stopped and tilted his head slightly. One did not know if he was looking at this side. Shin Miao looked at him quietly. In the night, the long corridor in the palace was deep and serene. This person was covered in the moonlight as he stepped on the swaying shadows of the trees. One could not see clearly what expression he had, but one felt that he was like an immortal demon from a painting. He slowly stretched out his hand, and his fingers slightly bent before lightly knocking 3 times on the pillar at the palace door. Shin Xiu and Luo Ling discovered that Shin Miao did not follow over. Shin Xiu walked in front of Shin Miao and asked, "Younger sister, what are you looking at?" "Nothing." Shin Miao recovered to her senses and said, "Go to the horse carriage and wait first. The wind outside is strong so that one would not catch a cold." Luo Ling said warmly. Shin Miao nodded her head and lifted her feet to walk towards the horse carriage. But she suddenly stopped her footsteps and turned her head to look at the long corridor. The moonlight in the corridor was like water, and the flowers painted an intoxicating picture on the ground. When the breeze blew past, the flowers trembled, and there was no figure in the empty corridor. It was as if everything just now was an illusion. Luo Tan's soft urging voice was heard. Shen Miao turned around and closed her eyes before lifting the corner of her skirt up the horse carriage. Chapter 470. On the way back, Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyin did not speak much. Even though they tried to look relaxed on the surface, they still revealed some seriousness. Shen Xiu was also not his usual self. Even though Luo Tan had a carefree temperament, she was sensitive enough to sense that something was not right, and did not speak. Today one had offended Princess Mingyan, which also meant offending the crown prince of the Qin country. The Shen family had just returned, and was pushed to the teeth of the wind and waves. Even though Shen Xian tried his best to avoid it, it was like there was an invisible hand behind his back that pushed the Shen family out. Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyin were not afraid of any difficulties that might appear. But since Shen Miao appeared today, they were afraid that Princess Mingyan would hate Shen Miao and use underhanded means to trip them up. But things had already happened, and when the water comes, the earth will cover it. When the soldiers come, the generals will counter them. The only way was to better protect Shen Miao, and not let any slip-ups happen. By the time they returned to the residence, Shen Miao had entered her own courtyard to freshen up, and it was already somewhat late. She lit the oil lamp, and when Guyu saw that she did not have the intention to rest, she said, "Is young lady still worried about tonight's matter? It doesn't matter. With master and madam around, they won't let the Qin princess do anything stupid." Shen Miao shook her head. She was clearer than others what kind of temperament Princess Mingyan had. Princess Mingyan's temperament was very selfish and strong, and during the tribute banquet in the previous lifetime, Princess Mingyan also made things difficult for her. It was because Princess Mingyan thought that Fu Xiuyi was such an outstanding person, but he married such a vulgar wife, and was very disdainful. Now that the great Liang's people had changed to Prince Rui, the most outstanding person in Princess Mingyan's eyes had become Prince Rui, but she still did not let her off. Perhaps this was what people said. Some people's enmity was destined by the heavens. No matter how many lifetimes were separated. All of you go down. Shen Miao said, "I cannot sleep and will play chess for a while." Guyu still wanted to say something, but Jingzhe pulled her sleeves. Jingzhe said, "Then these servants will withdraw first. Young lady must not think too much. When one feels tired later, then rest early, and do not tire one's body. The night is cold, so don't stay up too late." Shen Miao complied and Jingzhe and Guyu retreated. On the small table in front of the table, there was an empty chessboard. Shen Miao held the white pieces in one hand, and the black pieces in the other, as she seriously played with herself. She played seriously. Time slowly passed, and the chess game gradually changed from nothing at the beginning to black and white crisscrossing, appearing extremely complicated. In the beginning, she was able to play the game with ease, but later on, she had to think hard for a long time before she placed a piece. It was so quiet outside the courtyard that one could not even hear the chirping of the birds and the chirping of the insects as the Ding capital fell into a beautiful dream. A cool breeze was blowing in the courtyard. Shen Miao looked at the chessboard and gently exhaled. Over the past 2 years, the various forces had taken turns to enter the stage, and the chess pieces that had been arranged had already reached their positions. From a certain point of view, even if they had the upper hand, they might not necessarily be able to achieve successive victories. This was a game between her and Fu Xiuyi, but now it seemed that she still thought of some things too simply. Everything in this world was changing. She was changing. She was no longer the her from her previous life. Naturally, other people would change as well. The only thing that didn't change was the change itself. No one could predict what kind of changes these changes would bring to the game. She glanced at the chess game on the table, stood up, walked to the window and opened it. The rustling autumn wind that blew in from the window gave rise to some coolness. The shadows of the trees swayed in front of the window. She looked at it for a while before turning around. The oil lamp in the room had burned to the last bit, and the candle flame flickered before extinguishing. When the lamp was extinguished, the moonlight flowed into the room like flowing water, illuminating the room. It was a little cooler than the lights. A sound was heard from the front of the table. One did not know when a person was sitting in front of the chessboard. He held a black piece in his hand, and casually placed it on the board before raising his head to look at Shen Miao. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.